Hello and welcome to episode 11 of the RF Generation PlayCast for February 2015. This is Grey Ghost 81. This time around for the retro segment, Rich, Steven, and I discuss a true classic of the action-adventure genre, Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, for the Super Nintendo and Game Boy Advance. On the modern side, Rich, Floyd, and special guest EngineerMike delve into the modern cult hit 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, better known as 999 for the Nintendo DS. As usual, it is advised that listeners of this podcast have already played the aforementioned games because our discussions are rotten with spoilers. As always, you can listen to the show on Podomatic, iTunes, and YouTube, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Go log on to rfgeneration.com to join our playthroughs and discuss the awesome games we play. Thank you as always for listening, and now on with the PlayCast.
So hello and welcome to the Retro Podcast for February 2015. I'm your host Rich, and with me this time on the show is our good friend Grey Ghost 81, or Shawn.
What's up, everybody?
And we've also got our newest member, Mr. Disposed Hero, and you guys know him on the show as Steven.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
Well, without further ado, we'll just go ahead and get to it. Steven actually hosted the show. Actually hosted the game in February. His first game, a big title, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. So we'll just let him go ahead and describe the game and tell you a little bit about it.
Well, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was made by Nintendo for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. It was released in 1991 in Japan and 1992 in North America and Europe. It was developed by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto and his development team. It's an action-adventure game played from a top-down perspective, and it's the follow-up to the first two Zelda games that came out on the Nintendo Entertainment System. You play as a young boy named Link. You go on a quest to save the Princess Zelda and the land of Hyrule from the evil Ganon. Along the way, you fight a ton of enemies and some nasty bosses. You explore dungeons. You collect a lot of items and tools and weapons that are necessary to complete your adventure. It's pretty much your standard Zelda formula that Nintendo has stuck to for the past almost 30 years. It's considered by many to be one of the greatest games of all time, and it actually finally got a direct sequel more than 20 years after its first release on the 3DS called A Link Between Worlds.
All right, so before we get into the game and really talking about it, I just want to just sort of list off the participants we had this month. Of course, with a game like Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, that draws a big crowd, and was no exception with this playthrough. We had Addicted, Seavers 2, Mr. Disposed Hero, of course, who finished the game, Dougly 007, Eric Escapade, one of our German site members, Fleech, of course, Grey Ghost 81, Shawn, he has finished the game, and most recently, right, Shawn?
I finished it yesterday morning, actually.
Awesome. I think I finished it one day before you did, so I'm a recent finisher as well. And let's see, we had a new member, Gredler. Was this a friend of yours, Steven? Is that correct?
I think it was either maybe Dougly 007 or maybe Jerry Greenwood. I'm not
okay.
sure. But, it wasn't me. So.
Yeah, new site member. So welcome to the site, Gredler. Hope you'll join us for some other playthroughs. And of course, Jerry Greenwood, who is always busy on the forums, telling us a lot about the games. We always appreciate his participation, and he also has finished the game. Another one of our newer members, our actual shmup champion from December 2014. He has the belt to prove it, and we've seen it on the website. Metal Fro. Newpoil is playing with us this time. He has finished the game. Russ Lyman, or Rusly Man, is playing. Myself, and as I mentioned, I finished the game. Wimpster and ZC Rich 01 is playing the game as well, another newer member who's been very active on the site. So thanks everyone for joining us this month, and hopefully we can do this game some justice in discussing it. We'll kind of start off, you've already told us a little bit about the story and sort of the story overview of this game. I think I was talking to Floyd today, and I was like, well, it's just sort of that game, girl gets stolen, hero rescues girl, fight bad guy, and game ends, right? It's not the deepest, I would say, plot for a game.
Yeah, it's pretty standard stuff.
And there's not a lot that changes throughout the game either. I mean, you sort of stick to that plot. I know Floyd was talking about he hasn't quite finished the game yet. He didn't want any spoilers or anything like that to be revealed to him. And I was like, well, there's not really any spoilers to be revealed. You just
not
kind
much
of
to spoil.
Yeah, you just kind of play the game. It's like pretty much any other Zelda title. So I guess my question is and I know we'll get to this as we go along. But just something to think about as we go along is what makes this game special. I know you mentioned that a lot of people think that this is the best Zelda game of all time. And, I hope we'll kind of dig into that and sort of figure out why we think that this may be the best Zelda game of all time. Maybe some of you will disagree. I guess we'll kind of start out with talking a little bit about the gameplay and controls. How were the controls for you guys? What did you think about, the button locations and things of that nature?
Well, I guess let me go first because I played it on the Game Boy Advance.
Oh, nice.
So I own a Super Nintendo cart, and I should have probably tested it out and played around with it, but I didn't. I only played the Game Boy Advance version because I'm really busy at home on the, in my personal life, and also I'm playing a very deep console game right now, so I didn't have any free time at home. So I played this game on the Game Boy Advance at work almost exclusively. And the only problems I had with the controls was that sometimes I couldn't get Link to face the right direction in the heat of the moment. In the heat of battle, like I'd be slashing away trying to face down and I'd be facing right or something. And that got frustrated for me sometimes. But as far as on the Game Boy Advance, you use your items with A, you slash your sword with B. Pull up your item menu with select and your map screen with L. And I forget what the R button does something too. But, R does like picking stuff up. And throwing stuff. So that's about it. I don't know what I was missing there, but I'm sure there's a little bit more opportunity for hotkeying on the Super Nintendo version.
No, I think you hit it pretty well. I mean, with the Super Nintendo controller, and it's good to hear your perspective from playing it on the Game Boy Advance. But it seems like you've got you're using sort of the upper trigger keys to pick up things and throw them. Whereas on Super Nintendo, we're pretty much using our X and Y buttons instead to do those sort of maneuvers. Right?
Okay.
Right, Steven?
Yeah, were the L and R buttons used at all? I don't even remember.
I don't think so. I know I didn't use them. The shoulder buttons aren't really used on the Super Nintendo controller, which
I didn't think so.
Makes a lot of sense. But with the Game Boy Advance, it seems that
it only has a 2 face button, so they had to use the triggers.
Yeah. I sort of found the controls on this game a little bit difficult at times. I feel like with as far as proximity of enemies, sometimes the box would sort of go forward a little too much. I was a little closer, or I was further away from enemies sometimes, and I noticed this a lot when I was not so much using my sword because it had a reach on it, but a lot of times when I was using the hammer weapon, I felt like I couldn't get close enough, or I was too far away, especially in a certain boss battle. I think you guys know which one I'm talking about. The scorpion type monster with the mask on. You have to break it with the hammer. I had a little bit of difficulty with that battle for some reason. Maybe I'm the only one.
I don't recall having any trouble with that one. But,
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe Shawn had some trouble. I don't know.
No, I don't know. I didn't have any problems with the hammer, actually. I'm trying to think. And that boss, the Helmasaur King, was kind of a cool one for me. That was one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's always been one of my favorites, too.
Yeah. It's a cool battle and neat battle.
But you talk about like the hit detection. I don't know why. The first time I fought Blind, the boss of the fourth dungeon.
Is that the one that you with the girl that
Yeah,
you lead into the light? Okay.
Yeah, in terms of that guy.
Uh-huh.
You have to strike him in the head, and the first time I fought him, I had a really hard time hitting him. I just couldn't get a sense for the hitbox, but then I actually ended up dying in that fight, and went back the second time and didn't have any trouble at all, really. So I'm not really sure what happened there, but
yeah. Yeah, I think the controls are mapped out pretty well. You know, like Shawn had mentioned, you got one button for the sword. You know, you've got buttons to use your special items. You've got buttons to pick up and throw. You know, and then you've got your menu that you pull up and use. So, which is I think start button on Super Nintendo. Which it's really standard. It's good. It's standard. A little more implemented since the Nintendo version, where you're just you've got two buttons. You get your A and B for your special, one for your special, and one for your sword. So I think the controls, all in all, are really good for the game. One of the kind of gameplay mechanics is the spinning sword, which is something new. In the series, and something that I really liked a lot and helped out a lot in a lot of battles. Did you guys use that quite a lot, or not much?
That's interesting. Yeah, I didn't use it I wouldn't say not at all, but I rarely found any use for it. Were you using it when you were getting crowded, or because it does, like, it swings around your whole body? Is it effective for crowd control, like when you're getting attacked from multiple sides? Like, I don't know. I just never used it, really.
Yeah. I mean, I'll let Steven kind of take that and talk about, did you use it a lot? Or?
No, actually. I forgot it was there most of the time.
Okay.
So, yeah, I didn't really use it very much at all.
I used it in a lot of boss battles. I didn't use it for, like you said, for like crowd control, sort of one-on-one or crowd battles with, just regular enemies. Most of the time that I was using it was during boss battles. I know, Shawn, you'd mentioned you had a little bit of an issue with the guy that kind of bounces around. I can't. Is it the third dungeon guy, the one that knocks you off the platform, knocks you down the floor? Yeah. I was using that a lot just because it has a kind of a sweeping circular area, and so if you have something like that, sometimes it's a little easier to connect a hit when you have like a larger radius. And so I used it then, and then I used it in Turtle Rock, the boss at the end of Turtle Rock, after his during his second phase, where he sort of flies around, and you have to hit that middle section. That was a really nice place to use that weapon. So, anything else you guys want to say about the controls, or do you want to move on to the weapons?
I'm good. We could.
I think that pretty much covers it. It's pretty standard, like you said. It's not really too much to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. So, we'll move on and talk a little about the weapons and the items that you can pick up in the game. And anyone want to start on that?
Well, let's see.
I'll just start off with the main weapon in the game. Of course, is the sword, and there's, like normal Zelda games, pretty much. You'll have your sword, and you can upgrade the sword throughout the game by picking up different swords. I know in the first game, it's like your first sword, you get the white sword, and then later on, you're able to pick up the master sword. This game is a little different in that you pick up the master sword sort of early in the game, after your third dungeon, and there are no other swords to pick up throughout. You basically just have upgrades done to your current sword, right? You've got the
tempered sword, and then the golden sword. Right.
And that strengthens your sword and helps you out quite a bit as you move through the tougher dungeons in the game. As far as items are concerned, this game is similar to other Zelda games in that there's usually one main item per dungeon that you pick up, and as a result, the game does a really cool job of, in my opinion, sort of using the pickups for each dungeon as a means for the boss fights and the aid in the boss fights.
Yeah, I really like that. Like we talked about Helmasaur, and you have to use the hammer to break his mask. And I think in the Swamp Palace you have to use the hook shot to pull those. I don't even know what they are, but those.
Sort of like a big jellyfish with this little,
with like these cotton ball looking things on them.
Yeah.
But those are two of my favorite boss fights in the game, and they use the items very effectively for those fights.
Yeah, and the moth boss, I know that you can beat him without using the fire, but I think the fire does quite a bit more damage than the regular sword does, so you can definitely take him down a lot quicker. And you actually have to have the fire rod to enter that last part of the forest, which is nice. Probably the oddest battle, I guess, is the Turtle Rock battle, where you have to use the fire rod and the ice rod. And if you don't have the ice rod, I guess you're just out of luck.
Yeah, because the ice rod you don't find that in a dungeon. It's just in some random cave out in the environment.
Right.
I guess it's easy to miss that.
Right. I think you get a few clues from some of the NPCs to tell you there's something in a cave near the lake to the east.
Right.
So, yeah. So, just some really cool upgrades. Like you mentioned, the hook shot is a really neat upgrade. Probably one of my favorite upgrades in the game. Favorite weapons. I don't know if you noticed this, but I used it a lot in dungeons when you're on like the sort of floating platforms, or you have to run by the fireballs that kind of swing around. If you throw the hook shot and the fire hits you, it won't hurt you. It'll just kind of go right through you.
That's a good cheat. Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It's a nice little cheat to use in the game. Did you guys have any favorite weapons or items in the game that you like to use quite a bit?
Fairy bottles all day, baby.
Yeah, the bottles are awesome.
Yeah, I got all 4 bottles, and I found that I mentioned this a few times on the forum, that I was noticing a pattern of, if you go into a boss with no healing items ready, it's a headache, and it can be really frustrating. But if you just bite your lip and get out of the dungeon and go farm some fairies and then go back in, it's a cakewalk. And I use the word negligible or trivial or something, but I wasn't trying to say that like it breaks the game, but it you worked to stock up on your items. First of all, you had to find all there are 4. So, I mean, even if you had 1 or 2, you would be out of benefit. I ended up getting all 4. So, and what's funny? Every time I said like, oh, I'm going to go farm some fairies and go back into the dungeon, I most of the time ended up not needing them, because I would just, like I said on the forum, having those healing items just kind of takes the edge off, and you get less like tensed up when you got all these fairies in your pocket. So it's a psychological thing, I think, but. Yeah. Even on Ganon, I was all stocked up, and by the time I beat him, I only lost like a couple hearts. He turned out to be really easy.
So did you use basically just fairies, Shawn, or were you getting were you buying any sort of pots or anything like that as well?
You know what? I didn't go for any potions, because I found that fairies can be found anywhere. And any shrub that you can slash, you can just go and slash it over and over till a fairy pops out. Do that 4 times. I mean, the longest that ever took me to get 4 fairies took like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And it was worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and they're free. So
yeah, if anyone's looking to farm fairies, in the Dark World. And the pyramid that you come down from at the beginning of the Dark World, there's a tree to the left-hand side, and if you super run into that tree, a fairy will pop out every time.
So that's cool.
I don't know if anybody knew that, but
no.
Just a good little hint, rule of thumb. I farmed there quite a bit. The bottles were actually a really cool item. Anything for you, Steven, that you any weapons that you used a lot, or kind of kept as your special weapon each throughout the game?
Yeah, probably the hook shot most often.
Yeah.
I thought it was just a very useful item to have on hand. Also, Also kept the boomerang in my hand most of the time, even though once you get so far into the game, the boomerang isn't very useful, but I just still just thought it was fun to throw it for no reason.
Yeah, yeah. And the boomerang's a little bit useful when you have the orange and blue sort of color changing areas. If you know what I'm talking about, the blocks that move up and down, you can use the boomerang for that quite a bit. I was kind of like you. I use the hook shot quite a lot because the sort of in the dungeons, the little blue and red jellyfish looking things that would light up and electrocute you if you hit them with your sword. Right. You could actually use the hook shot to take those out without worrying about having to take any damage.
Right. I would do the same thing with those.
All right.
You know what else was really good? Did you guys get the Bombos medallion?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I leaned on that a lot towards the end of the game because I want to say definitely Turtle Rock and Ganon's Tower. There are some rooms in there that are just insanity, and you're better off a lot of times just walking in the door and hitting the Bombos and killing everything, because it just gets really hairy right away. So I was using that a lot towards the end of the game, especially.
Yeah, I did too, Shawn. I know exactly which rooms you're talking about. It's the rooms with the crazy conveyor belts, statues with the eyeballs on them,
and ice on the floor and everything, and spike traps and.
It was the part where you had to defeat all the enemies in the room to actually open up the doors. Right. So if you did that, you could just when you enter the room, you do that, and you can just run right through. Yeah, I definitely use that, and surprisingly, once you've got the half magic. It doesn't take up all that much magic.
Yeah, I never got the magic meter upgrade. I did, I finished the game without it. I only got in trouble with it once, and that was to, I forget if it was Turtle Rock or Ganon's Tower, the part where you have to light the four lantern torches or whatever.
Yeah, the braziers or whatever. Yeah.
With the thing spinning around, and I didn't have any magic there. I had to revert to my save and go through about half the dungeon again to make sure I got to that room with full magic. But that was the only time it burned me to not get the magic bar upgrade.
Yeah. And the good thing about it, I know you were talking about how you would go back out to farm fairies, and how there would be sort of like when you would come back in, it would be almost, you would kind of do the area and it not like lose a lot of life. I think going through it and unlocking all the doors, getting everything you need with the keys, which is a good thing about the game. Once you get a big key in a dungeon, or you get the keys in a dungeon or unlock a door, they stay unlocked. It's not like when you go out, everything resets. Right. So you can go out and go through an area, you're already familiar with it, and kind of get to the end a little bit easier, which is something I really liked about the game. I found myself doing that a few times, having to go back out and, like you said, farm fairies or, buy magic potions or something like that when I would get into a more difficult area. So, cool. Well, while we're talking about areas and dungeons, do we have any that were any of your favorites that were in the game?
Yeah, I always really liked the very first one, actually. The Eastern Palace.
Okay.
And also the first two in the Dark World, the Dark Palace and the Swamp Palace, I think were my most favorite ones.
Yeah. How about you, Shawn?
You know what? The Eastern Palace was pretty cool. I am thinking Misery Mire, just because I got through it so quickly, and I thought the boss was one of the coolest bosses. So I wouldn't say I was trying to speed run this game, but I was trying to, again, only play it on. Yeah, I was trying to be efficient. I was using a walkthrough. I was only playing it on my lunch and coffee breaks at work, and I was trying to finish it before we recorded this podcast.
Yeah.
So the one day I got through, I think I got through 3 dungeons in one day, and Misery Mire was my last one, and I did it in 10 minutes, and I was like, wow, that was awesome. And the boss was really cool. And I after that, I did also as frantic and crazy as they were, Turtle Rock and Ganon's Tower were really good. There was one, I'm looking at a gallery right here. I remember one of the dungeons was kind of giving me trouble even with the walkthrough, but I can't remember which one it was. But I guess that's a good. I'm more remembering the ones I liked than this one that gave me fits. So I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Let me just say that if you played Turtle Rock without a walkthrough, it probably wouldn't be your favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would imagine so. That it seems like a mess, especially with all the moving platforms and having to use the magic and
Right.
Yeah. I definitely I agree, and I didn't use a walkthrough, but I did like Turtle Rock. I do like that dungeon for whatever reason. It was the one I got stuck on for the longest. I think I put the game down for like 2 weeks because of that dungeon. I was so frustrated with it, but again, it was one of those things where I went back to it. I'd already had the big key. I'd already gotten the chest in there, and once I had that and kind of knew the pattern and what I needed to do, you know, it was pretty clear and smooth sailing from that. But probably one of the most aggravating rooms is in Turtle Rock, which is the one with the where the lights are out and you're on the platform that goes around. And you've got the spinning fireballs that rotate as you're doing that. But as I mentioned before, that's where I used my hook shot to my advantage, and just when those would get near me, I would throw the hook shot and they would just sort of pass right through me, which is
I think and I wish I'd have known the hook shot trick, because I think in that room I just took a lot of damage and just kind of ate it and kind of kamikazed my way to the door. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's definitely a room of trial and error where you have to, kind of see the room and know when to sort of go up and down to reach the, first of all, the platform that opens the door, and then secondly, the platform where you can exit,
Right.
So yeah. But that was probably one of my favorites. My least favorite dungeon has to be the Ice Palace. I hate that dungeon. And I actually did have to consult a walkthrough for that dungeon to sort of figure out how to get to the boss. I hate the ice floors, the sliding, the things that fly at you, and the penguin sort of creatures that sort of fly at you and slide across the ground. Those are annoying, but once again, an enemy that you can use the hook shot on, so I use that quite to my advantage for that.
I kind of like that dungeon. It wasn't my favorite, but it had kind of a vibe. It reminded me of the original Zelda on the NES for some reason.
Yeah.
Maybe because it was all blue or something. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I think my least favorite was what's it called? The Skull Woods. Actually.
Oh yeah, that's the one with the moth at the end, correct?
Right. Yeah, because you have to go into the forest and back into the dungeon so many times, and it gets kind of confusing. And then those hands would try to grab you and pull you out. That hand that drops from the ceiling.
Yeah,
that's pretty annoying. But yeah, that's always been my least favorite, I think.
I actually like that dungeon, but I don't like the boss battle. The boss battle is probably my least favorite in the game. Just because, and I think Steven, maybe it was you that said that battle wasn't that bad, or you didn't think it was that bad, but just being on that floor and the ice, and then the the spikes and stuff that are moving around, and then you're fighting the moth and everything. It's just a little too much for me. It was just very how did I describe that battle? Just very sort of erratic. I guess, just all over the place.
And I'd actually forgotten about the floor moving and everything when I made that comment. I actually went back and watched a YouTube video of all the boss fights just to refresh my memory, and then I saw it, and I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
I've played this game so much over the years since I was a kid, and I think I just I don't really have much trouble with any of it because I've played it so much. It's just like second nature to play through this game for me now. But I can totally see somebody, walking into that room and the floor starts moving and you're falling into the spikes and the moth thing is shooting at you. Yeah, I can totally see it being a pain for a lot of people.
Right. I think the funniest thing for me was I haven't played this game since I was a kid, since it came out, and I remembered going into the woods. I remembered that battle, and I remember how annoying that battle was when I was a kid. That's how bad it was for me. It was just implanted in my memory that this was going to be awful, So maybe that had a little to do with it, but at the same time, just one of my least favorite battles. And I will say this: one of the things I really like about Link to the Past is the how different the dungeons are and how they take on these sort of characteristics. Like you were mentioning, like even though I don't like the Ice Palace, I still think it's cool because the floors are slick. The walls look crystallized, and it really embodies what an ice palace would be, right?
Yeah.
And so same thing for like Misery Mire. The enemies sort of relate well to the different towers and the different dungeons, which is one of the things that I really like about this game. So we've spoken a little about the bosses, and I wanted to move on and talk a little bit about the enemies. I should mention that this is a good group to be discussing this game because for Steven, as Steven mentioned, he's played this game multiple times. I played this game when I was younger, and this is my second playthrough through now when I'm older. So kind of reflecting back on it. And then, Shawn, this is your first go, right?
Yeah, this is the first time I've ever played this game, and only the second Zelda game that I've played to completion so far, the other one being the Wind Waker. So I have a totally non-nostalgic viewpoint of this game, which may be controversial later on in this conversation, but I'm trying my best to be civil.
No, and everyone has their own opinion, and so we look forward to hearing kind of your final thoughts on the game as well. So, and I know something that you mentioned. We're kind of getting into discussing the enemies, and one of the things that I noticed you mentioned on the forums was sort of the enemies in the game, and I think you were mentioning sort of the outworld enemies on the game, not necessarily the dungeon enemies, and kind of mentioning something about them not having much of a purpose in the game.
Yeah, what I was trying to say was that for a game like this, especially, again, I'm just playing with a walkthrough, so I'm just basically, crossing things off a checklist. Go here, talk to this guy, get this item, get this key, go there, do that. So it's where I kind of drew the line was that this isn't an RPG, so there's no benefit to killing an enemy. You don't level up, you don't get XP, nothing happens. If anything, maybe you're farming rupees or you need some hearts, but that's not, even killing enemies is not the best way to do that. So a lot of times I just felt the enemies were kind of an annoyance. Now there were certain ones that were like fun to kind of hunt down and kill. A lot of them had like cool mechanics. I like as annoying as they were, the Stalfos, which are the skeletons that jump away from you when you try to hit them. Ugh. Like as much as I hate them, it's just kind of funny. Like their animation was really funny, and they're like, "No, you can't get me." Like I liked each enemy had its own like unique challenge. One of the things I didn't like especially were the enemies that you couldn't kill, like. There's a lot of like not only like the blade traps and spike traps, but like this thing, the Gibo, which is that red like blob that just kind of bounces around the rooms, and you can't do anything about it,
Okay. Yeah.
Or there's a couple other ones,
yeah.
But yeah, that's all I was saying was that like you could run through the whole game and basically avoid all the enemies, except for in dungeons there's rooms that you got to kill all the enemies to open the room, but you know what I'm saying, like in the overworld you could just run around and avoid them, and sometimes it's like, all right, come on, get out of my way, I gotta go talk to this guy and get this thing, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I think a lot of people would agree with that statement. I mean, I agree with that statement, and if you watch people who actually play the game and speedrun the game, I mean, there's, once they get the dash, they're using the dash the entire time and just dashing through enemies as quick as they can to get from point A to point B, or from dungeon to dungeon. So, I mean, I absolutely, know what you're saying and, agree, and that's sort of how Zelda games are set up, from the original ones the same way. There's not a lot of purpose in the outworld enemies except to be sort of an obstacle and a threat in getting to the next area, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think you have to maybe think of it more like a game like Mario, where it's just enemies that are in your way and you have to get around them or go through them. Yeah, they're just there as an obstacle for the challenge of it. It's actually, you brought up Wind Waker. It's actually kind of one of the problems I had with Wind Waker was you would, when you were sailing, there weren't that many enemies around, so it was kind of boring just to sail from one island to another. Actually, when I was traveling in A Link to the Past, I actually enjoyed, killing the enemies that were in my way.
Mm-hmm. And there's always
fair. That's totally fair. And I'm not like, I wouldn't have designed the game in any other like different way. You know what I mean? It's just my play style and my preference, the way I played it. It's more like I'm playing this game as a task list, and literally just walking through it. So it's like, oh, enemies, okay, here we go. Like get out of my way, But it's totally a thing. It's a problem with me and not the games. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, it's a valid point. I totally see what you're saying. You might like Zelda 2 because that game you actually get experience points for killing enemies. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's one you should try.
All right.
Yeah, has a little more RPG element to it for sure. All right. Any favorite? I know we were talking about just sort of the. The Outland characters. We talked a little about the dungeon characters, but any favorite bosses that you guys in particularly enjoyed?
This is hard. I've looked at a list, and I'm looking at it right now of bosses, and I think it's hard to, other than Maldorm, which is the thing that knocks you off the platform. I liked all the bosses. Mm-hmm. I didn't dislike any of them, and I didn't find any issues, and I think again I just keep harping back to this pattern that I had of, wow, this boss is total crap, I can't believe this, and then just regrouping and going back in, and wow, that boss was really cool, like Mothula, like this is just mayhem. How could they design a boss like this? You go in again and you realize you can hit it on top of the head with a hammer and it goes down in like 3 hits. You know what I mean? Oh, wow. So it's like, once you figure out what to do, or just with Ganon, it was just learning not to panic and just like kind of relaxing and just letting him do his thing and not being aggressive and, learning how to move and everything. And the time I beat Ganon was like really fun, and like, I just kind of cruised through it. So it's hard to pick. Like, every time I look at the list, I thought, oh, wait, that one was really cool. No, wait, that one was really cool. But, like I said, I really liked Vitreous, which was the eyeball with many smaller eyeballs that kind of comes at you. That was in Misery Mire, which I was saying was one of my favorite dungeons.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So that was a cool one. Like, the 4 eyeballs come at you, and you have to slash him while he's shooting lightning at you, and then at the end he comes at you, but you can just whale him with arrows. So, like, again, if you kind of know what to do, you can take him down, and it's pretty cool. So that was my favorite, I think.
Yeah, it seems like it's a common thread in any Zelda game that anything that has eyes, or especially is cycloptic, you always use arrows, right?
Okay, yeah, I guess so. I'm still learning my Zelda tricks, but yeah, that works for me there.
Steven, you could probably speak more to that than any of us. I'm sure you've played more of the Zelda games than we have.
Yeah, that seems like a common thing, or either that, or I think some of the 3D ones have a slingshot. And, that works. I think you use that sometimes. But as far as the bosses, I pretty much agree with what Shawn said. I mean, the only one I thought was kind of frustrating and annoying was Moldorm. The others, I like them all. I think my favorites were probably the first 2, and the first 2 in the Light World, and then the first 2 in the Dark World, which was the one from the Eastern Palace where the knights are jumping around. You have to shoot them with arrows, and then the one after that where the sandworm things were jumping out of the ground. And I think about it, I don't really feel like there's anything too special about those boss fights, and maybe it's just like nostalgia, because I was very young when I first played this game, and maybe that's about as far as I made it for a while, and I just kind of remember fighting those. But yeah, then the first two in the Dark World, we kind of already talked about them, Helmasaur and I don't know the name of the other one, but the one you use the hook shot on, and they make very good use of the items from those dungeons, and they're just fun to fight.
Yeah, I agree. I think all the boss battles are just really cool and really special. I think they put a lot of time, a lot of thought. Love the integration, as we mentioned before, of the weapons that you pick up in the dungeons. Probably one of my favorites was probably the hook shot boss, the one you're picking like the cotton ball looking creatures off of, and then after you pull all of them off, it goes up in the air and splashes down in the water and just runs rampant all over the place, and you have to hit it with your sword. It's a lot of fun. Just a really neat battle, and I can't really, except for the moth one that I still don't like. I can't really think of any battle, any boss battle that I really detested in the game. I thought they are all just a lot of fun, and just something else that really makes this game special. Just a lot of different pieces to that. How about the music? Talk a little bit about the music in the game. I know there's some really good back and forth discussion between you, Steven, and Jerry about the music in the game. And you want to tell us a little bit about some of the things you guys were talking about, and maybe anything you want to add as far as the music is concerned.
Just a couple of things I noticed while I was playing is that the Death Mountain theme, it just reminded me a lot of the Imperial March theme from Star Wars, and I don't know if that was kind of intentional, or if Koji Kondo, the composer for this game, maybe he drew inspiration from that. I don't know, maybe it's just a coincidence. I also noticed the ending theme is very reminiscent of a theme from the Final Fantasy games. I know it was in the first one and the fourth one. I'm not sure if it was in any others, but yeah, I mean, it's almost, there's a certain section of it that's almost note for note, and it almost sounds like a rip-off. But I don't know if anybody else noticed those similarities.
No, I think music for me, I love music in a game, and I can appreciate music. A lot of times I'm not going to pick up on music from one game to the next, and it's really cool that you and Jerry were able to pick up on things like that, and it made for a really good or a really interesting conversation on the forums. I do like the music in this game. It's really good. The dungeon music's kind of skittish. It gives you a sense of tenseness, if you will, when you're playing. The
very ominous sounding.
Right, and it really fits well. It seems like the music really fits well with the game and what they're trying to accomplish. Shawn, did you have any thoughts on the music or anything you liked in particular, or disliked?
There was nothing I disliked. I did catch the Imperial March similarities on the Death Mountain thing. That's a good. That's a really good catch there. I think some people noted on the forum that as some of the more intense dungeon music gets a little grating after a while, after repeating so many times. And but again, I was playing in short spurts. I was using headphones. I have a headphone adapter for my Game Boy Advance SP. Why on earth that was designed without a headphone jack, the world will never know. But I do have an adapter, and I listen to this music with headphones. I guess hearing the kind of souped-up version of the Hyrule Field overworld theme made it worth any other not-so-great music. You know what I mean? Like, even someone like me who's not a big Zelda fan, I mean, how could you not get pumped by the Hyrule Field, the theme?
Yeah. The series has been notorious for having just really solid music, and I think this game is no exception to that. And I enjoyed everything about it. Although, like I said, typically with me, music just doesn't stand out. I guess when I'm playing a game, I'm so intense about what I'm doing that I'm not really thinking about the music, and probably that's why the dungeon music probably being so intense probably resonated with me the most. But one thing I will talk about, it's not necessarily music but sound, is the low life sound. I don't think you can get around not talking about that and how annoying that is. It might be one of the most annoying things of any game I've ever played. It's loud, it's boisterous, it makes you just want to throw your controller, and you're just searching for hearts, and you're just like, oh man, I hope I find a heart sooner. I'm just going to go nuts.
Just make it stop.
Exactly. So.
You know what? I think if they had an alarm like that, but only played it at like maybe 1/2 or 1/4 of the iterations that it actually does. Like imagine if it, instead of brant, 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 if it was just going brant, 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 you know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
Or even like half of that. It would be fine, but as it stands, it rivals like Baby Mario and Yoshi's Island for the most annoying sound effect ever. But I think it's worth noting that in the Game Boy Advance version, there's some of the voice sound effects of Link, like when he falls down a pit. I understand that they took them from Ocarina of Time. So when he falls down a pit, you get the same that you would get in that game, kind of dubbed into the Game Boy Advance port of this game.
No, I didn't realize that.
Doesn't it do it when he slashes too?
Yeah, he does all those, all those cute little grunts and yells that he does are all kind of dubbed into the game. It's pretty cool.
Oh, cool. Yeah, we kind of get a falling sound, which is kind of a funny sound and kind of a neat part of the game. Let's talk a little about the ending. As far as the last battle with Ganon, worthy battle, too difficult, not difficult enough. How does it fall as far in terms of with a lot of other games that you guys play in terms of difficulty?
I don't think it's that difficult once you know how to beat him. For me, the most annoying part was I would keep getting knocked off the ledge and fall, and then if that happens, you have to go back and restart the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I found that very frustrating, but yeah, like Shawn said, he went back on his second try and had no trouble with it, and just like once you know what to do against him, it's not too difficult.
Yeah, I was using the I'd started using the lanterns just to sort of conserve magic, just in case I needed it. To light the, in that phase where you have to light the braziers. I found that I would have to get too close to light them, so running along the bottom was a horrible idea, because he would always do that, he would fire that like flaming bat at you, and if that hit you and you were too close to the edge, you're just going to fall off. So I know I fell off 3 times while my kids were sitting there watching me play this game, and
did you get audio of that?
I wish I would have, because I was like really like, it was my terrifying gamer persona came out, where I was just getting mad, and then of course my sweet 6-year-old daughter says, "It's okay, Daddy. You're good enough. You'll get it next time," and it just makes me feel horrible, as a gamer. I'm passing on these horrible traits, of, getting ready to throw controllers, but it's funny that my kids keep me kind of level-headed, which is sort of nice having them around when I'm playing. But yeah, that was one of the most frustrating parts of the fight, was lighting those. And finally, I just started using the wand, which I could hit from a distance and light them really quick, and it just it made it much better. How about with you, Steven? How would you rank this sort of final fight?
Honestly, I'd probably say out of all the boss fights in the game, it's probably one of my least favorites, really.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it's bad, but I just, I don't know. I guess it doesn't really have a good hook to it like a lot of the others do. It's actually kind of reminiscent of the final boss in the original Zelda. I think that's maybe what they were going for. But, yeah, not really one of my favorites.
Right. It was, yeah, you could see where they were trying to bring that back. You hit Ganon with the Master Sword, and then you have to hit him with the silver arrows, right, to win the game. And that was sort of the thing they were trying to bring back, which was nice, that they thought to do that. And so anyone who had played the original game knew to use knew that when he froze that you had to use the silver arrows. So, just a really good callback or allusion to the original game, I thought. But I kind of agree with you. It wasn't, it wasn't an overly difficult fight. It was a long fight, right? I mean, it was, of all the creatures, he, definitely took the most hits, and there were definitely three or four phases that you had to get through to defeat him. So that was kind of nice, but I don't know. I maybe I would have liked to seen a little more use of all the items, in the different stages, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Yeah, because I feel like with all the other boss battles, there would always be sort of like an item in the dungeon that you basically, and not everyone, but that you basically had to use to defeat that boss. And I think like some sort of culmination of all that would have been kind of a nice way to end it. But yeah, just my opinion. I know I may get some flack for that. We may all get some flack for being anyway negative about this game. It's such a beloved title, right?
That's true. It's really a sacred cow.
I mean, no, this is one of my favorite games of all time, and but I'm just not gonna ignore the flaws, or it's not even really a flaw. I just think the boss battle could have been better.
Absolutely.
The final boss fight.
Absolutely. We'll forgive you for anything negative you said, Steve. in Shawn's place, he'll probably make hamburgers out of the sacred cow, I'm thinking, maybe. I don't know. It probably won't be that bad, but we'll kind of get to that. And so I guess the sort of the other thing I wanted to talk about was Stephen, you had mentioned just sort of maybe comparing and contrasting the other Zelda games in the series. This being one of the 2D games. Honestly, I know it's probably sounds pretty bad, but I've only played the original Zelda. I've played some of the second, never played it to completion. I've played this game, and I've played Minish Cap, which I've made it probably 3/4 of the way through and didn't finish. And Shawn, you said you've only played really 2 to completion, but have you dabbled in any of the others?
Only the original when I was a kid, but I was never like serious about it.
Right.
I had no idea ever what to do. Probably just ran around the first couple screens swinging the sword, and that's about it.
Right. Okay, so Steven, you want to tell us a little bit, or compare and contrast the different Zelda titles?
Well, like I said, this is not only one of my favorite games of all time. This is my favorite Zelda game. It's I've been playing a lot of the 2D Zelda games recently, and I find it kind of hard. Like I tried to play a little bit of Ocarina of Time on the 3DS, and it seemed very awkward trying to do that transition from the 2D gameplay to 3D.
Right.
Maybe it's just something I have to get used to again, because I have played it before. But I guess as far as wanting to compare and contrast, I think the main thing that might be worth talking about is comparing it to Wind Waker, which is what we played last year for a community playthrough.
Right.
And I don't know, did you play that one, Rich, when we played it?
I did not.
Yeah.
I did not have it at the time.
Because I know Shawn played it. I'm kind of interested in hearing his take on that, comparing the two.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. It was, what, I kind of had in a way very similar experience of, again, like saying this is not my most preferred style of game. I don't go out of my way to play this kind of action adventure, try to figure out what to do next kind of game. But I know that, like, when I was playing Wind Waker, I was seeing like the culmination of like these iterations of gameplay that kind of started with A Link to the Past. And I know that, like, if people look at like Ocarina of Time, which I haven't played, but they'll say, well, basically that was a 3D version of Link to the Past. And I would go so far as to say, well, so is Wind Waker, and I would guess that so is Twilight Princess, and so is Skyward Sword. Like, it's pretty much well known that these games just kind of, they're kind of just redoing Link to the Past and just iterating on the formula.
They stick pretty closely to that standard Zelda formula.
Right. So it was kind of a learning experience to start with Wind Waker, which is not so much anymore. It's a little bit more of a mainstream accepted game now, but for a while it was like the black sheep of the series. So to start with that one, which was kind of like a weird one, and I'm not counting Majora's Mask because that's something that doesn't go by the formula, but to go from that and then now to go back to Link to the Past, it is kind of cool to see that it is kind of the same game, and some of the structure of the game and the pacing and the flow are it kind of comes out of Link to the Past. And I'm actually really excited to play Link Between Worlds, which I picked up a copy of last year, and it may have sat on the shelf forever, but now I'm like 1,000 times more likely to go and check it out, knowing that it's like, if not a direct sequel, then like pretty much a follow-up to this game. So
yeah, I had no idea.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to really like. I actually looked at like some screenshots and videos of that, and I was like, whoa! It's like now it's like a super souped up version of Link to the Past. It looks awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just recently played A Link Between Worlds myself. I wanted to follow A Link to the Past up with the sequel, and it's basically, in a lot of ways, just a remake of A Link to the Past. I mean, it's very similar. Like having just played A Link to the Past, you'll feel right at home playing that game because it's the same overworld map. The dungeons are pretty much all in the same locations, although the layouts are different. I think that's the way to do it, is to play A Link to the Past and then follow it up with A Link Between Worlds. I think that's how you'll get the most enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, and it's a 2D game as well, right?
Yeah, and you can kind of, it is in 2D, but you can kind of, there's a sense of 3D to it.
Right.
You can kind of, how like Link to the Past, because it's on a 16-bit system and everything, it moves like on a grid.
Mm-hmm.
You got to tell how it's tiled.
Mm-hmm.
Link Between Worlds, there's more freedom of movement.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually something I like more about that game. But yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
Okay, good deal. And sort of my thoughts. I mean, I'm, as you guys know, I'm not a big fan of the 64. But a lot of that has to do with the 3D aspect that the 64 tried to create. In the Mario games, in the Zelda games, and things of that nature. And maybe it's just nostalgia speaking for me, but to me, the Zelda series and the Metroid series will always be 2D games. I mean, that's just how that's how I've always preferred those games, and so anything that deviates from that never feels like a Metroid or a Zelda game to me. And that's that's sort of a personal thing. These are the games I grew up, and I loved growing up, and just because you put a skin on it or incorporate some themes or bosses that were in the other games, they just, I don't know, for me they just never feel right. And I maybe I'm the only one on that, and I just love the 2D feel of those games. Just feel like they're kind of always meant for that, and that's why I started playing Minish Cap. And actually, of what I played of that, I really, really enjoyed that game.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I was still very young when Ocarina of Time came out, and I played that. Mm-hmm. So, it's even that game still has a nostalgia factor for me. So,
right.
I guess the 3D Zeldas don't feel too out of place for me. And I played like Twilight Princess when it came out, and I thought that game was amazing.
Yeah.
As far as 3D Zelda games, I think that's probably maybe the first one you should check out, in my opinion. Well, like you were talking about Metroid, I kind of agree with that. I never really got behind the Metroid Prime games, and the 2D ones are amazing, especially Super Metroid, of course.
Yeah. I mean, I should definitely give the games a chance, and I haven't given them a fair chance. I'll be honest, I'm obviously being the old man in the rocking chair, yelling at kids to pull their pants up. That's probably what I'm being right now. But I don't know. When you grow up with a certain feel in the way things are, it just you just feel more at home playing those sort of games, and I guess that's kind of how I stand on the 2D and 3D. So, but yeah, I would like to maybe give it a go sometime, and hopefully, and I'm sure with the playthroughs and the games that we play, we'll definitely see more Zelda games in the future popping up. So, we'll just kind of wrap it up. If you guys have any closing thoughts or anything else you'd like to add about this game.
Yeah, I guess, are we going to talk about the legacy of this game, and is it the greatest game of all time that we should all bow before and do Wayne's World, We're Not Worthy, or is it just a really good Super Nintendo game?
I think by that tone, we all know your stance on that.
No, well, again, just my point real quick. Again, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm just, I'm looking at this game objectively, and you guys are wearing your nostalgia glasses, and I'm smart and you're stupid for that reason. It's not that. But what I'm saying is, like, for me, like, this is just another game to me, and I'm really glad. I would have never played this if it weren't for the playthrough, just like Wind Waker. So again, I would have probably been a person who, because I'm a video game collector, collect every Zelda game and never have played them. So I'm again, just like with Wind Waker, very grateful that this came up for the playthrough, so I'd have like an incentive and a reason to play it. But like, having said that, the people who say this is an all-time greatest game, I can't, whatever, good on you. I can't argue with that. But as far as for me, like, it's probably not, like, I think of 5 SNES games that I think are better, like, off the top of my head. But I really liked it, and I had a unique, fun experience playing it the way I did. Like, okay, I'm going to do this dungeon next. Print out the walkthrough, take the walkthrough with me to the lounge, and sit down and grind through a dungeon in 15 minutes if I can. You know what I mean? Then go on my lunch break and do the next one. Like, that's how I played this game 100. Well, I'm going to say 95%. And then yesterday morning, I beat Ganon sitting at my kitchen table. So it was kind of fun the way I was like, kind of tasking through this game. So I have this unique kind of perspective of it, where I think a lot of people spend entire summers playing this game and going through that whole ritual of like, having your brother or your dad help you with it, or the kids at school, and how do I get this whistle that calls a bird to carry you around the world? I need that. How do you get that? You know what I mean? Like, whereas me, it was just like, okay, go here, talk to this guy, chop down the bush or get the shovel or whatever, and then you got a warp whistle. Okay, done. Next thing, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a unique perspective that I guess I have on it, but without the nostalgia, I'm just saying, wow, this is really good. Like, I can appreciate what people say about the design of the game and everything else, but it's just like, it's another just NES classic for me. So
yeah, and I think I really think your point's extremely valid, and what you're saying is valid. I think people like myself who kind of grew up as a kid playing this game. I mean, there was nothing like this game that came out at the time when I was a kid. I mean, I understand nostalgia is a bias, but also I think, like, not growing up or not playing that when you're younger, there can be some bias built from that as well. I think that this game, the original game was such a hit. The original game. I mean, I remember the commercials. I remember when it came out. I remember everyone having those gold carts and flashing them around, like they were real gold. It was such a hit. And then Zelda 2 came out, which was pretty much, I mean, I know people defend that game, but quite honestly, like growing up around that time, that game was a flop. And what I mean by that is it did not come from the same. It felt like a completely different game from the first one, and that's not what people were expecting. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I'm saying it did not meet expectation at that time as a Zelda game and what a Zelda game should be. That top-down action. But with this game, this being the third installment in the series, and it having that same top-down perspective, the same dungeon crawling, the same item grab in the dungeon, with the, except just not finding items, but opening the big chest and like little intricacies and extra things added to it. It had that same feel as that original game, and I think, of course I'm biased. I mean, I'll admit to it, I have no problem admitting to it, but when you add all that together, I mean, it comes to a great game. And playing it now and not playing it then, I think you've played so many more games, so many more modern games that are so much more advanced that it's kind of hard to go back, if you will, and play something that, maybe so many people have, expressed so many accolades about. But
yeah, and having said that, the game holds up extremely well. It's not like there's anything archaic or old or like broken about it.
And I'll say this too. I mean, it's I love the game, but it's probably not my favorite game on the Super Nintendo, and probably somewhere in the top 10, maybe top 5 if I had to pull them out. But, still a great game, and, one I remember fondly. Probably, and my favorite in the Zelda series that I've played, but that's been a very limited amount, as I've stated, so.
Yeah, it's, I think the whole nostalgic point is very valid. I mean, like I said, this is a game I played at a very young age, and it's a very nostalgic game for me, maybe my most nostalgic game, and certainly that has an impact on how I view it now. But saying that, and Shawn, I understand the reasons why you used a walkthrough, but they're perfectly valid reasons. But I feel like this is a game that's really meant to be explored on your own. And like you said, you didn't have that experience growing up to play it the way me and Rich did, but I think that's really how it's meant to be played.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that maybe would have taken away from the experience for you somewhat.
Yeah. I totally am fine with that assessment. The same thing happened with Eco and to a certain extent the Wind Waker. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's just my play style, my like immediate frustration and boredom when I don't know exactly what to do. That's just the way I am. And maybe I wasn't that way when I was a kid. Actually, I know I wasn't. I mentioned in the forum that my father and I used to play, PC point-and-click adventure games that would take us months upon months to complete, just figuring out the puzzles. So I know what it's like. It's we talked about it on the forum thread, modern life and being, where we are in our lives. A lot of us don't have time for that, and I kind of don't, right? What I mean? So
no, that's very valid points all around. I completely agree with both of you on that, and and just want to express something that Shawn had mentioned before. I would never attack anyone for using a walkthrough. I do agree with Steven that this game is one that is sort of meant to be explored, but within the time constraints of a month that we do these games, if someone wants to use a walkthrough, that's perfectly fine. I consult them on some of the games that we play. And anyone who's joining us, I would never make anyone feel bad about doing it. The point of the playthroughs and doing this on the site is for all of us to do something as a community and enjoy ourselves. And if using a playthrough makes the experience more enjoyable to any of you, do it. I mean, none of us are going to knock you for doing that. And it's, it's how you enjoy playing. Just with anything else in life, we all have different preferences of how we like to play, or do other things in our life. So, by all means, do what you need to do, or do what you enjoy doing. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I guess we'll wrap it up here. Any more thoughts on the game, guys, or anything else you want to say? I don't want to leave you without.
No, that was about it for me. Just, fun. And again, happy to cross another one off the list. I can't say it enough. Thanks, everybody. I'm just grateful for the playthroughs, for kind of forcing me to play these games that I may not have been inspired to on my own. So it's awesome.
Right. I'll just say this. I just want to say, again, thanks to all of us, all of you guys who joined us for the playthrough this month. Thank you, Steven, for hosting. It was a great first experience hosting. You did a fine job with the forums and everything. As I mentioned, we've had 5 people beat the game so far, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from everyone on the forums throughout the rest of the month as they sort of wrap it up. We're sort of mid-month now and always record early. So if you didn't hear your name, sorry about that. But that's how it goes. So, again, thanks, guys. Appreciate you joining us. And until next time.
All right, and welcome back to the modern portion of the PlayCast. I am joined by my good friend Rich, as you know him, Single Banana.
Hey, guys. Yep, odd. Modern playthrough, you just said it threw me off.
Yeah, it was. I had to think about that. And the one and only, the guy from Ipanema, Mr. Engineer Mike. How are you?
I'm great, thank you, Floyd. It's an honor and a privilege to be joining you both.
That is an overstatement.
Yeah, we're happy to have Mike. If many of you who are on the website know, Mike is Krabby's best customer up in PG. So really happy to have him along. He actually doesn't just buy games all the time; he actually plays them.
I try to when I can.
Yeah. Anyways, so we played a very unusual game this month. Have you guys played a lot of visual novels before? I've played those choose your own adventure games, like Heavy Rain or Beyond Two Souls or like The Walking Dead, The Wolf Among Us, that type of stuff. So I'm not new to anything where your outcomes determine your ending, but apparently 999 is nothing like, let's say, The Walking Dead.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This is probably one of the first games I've played like this. I mean, I grew up, in the 80s, and I remember those choose your own adventure books. Do you guys remember those?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I think I had one called Secret of the Ninja was what it was called, but sort of choose your own adventure, and they had different endings, and there was always this sort of good ending as well. And so that's what 999 reminded me of. Since this game, I've played Wolf Among Us and some of The Walking Dead, and I've really enjoyed this sort of game. So, but this is probably the first one off the top of my head that I can think of. So,
now, have either of you two gentlemen played the Professor Layton series?
I've
played
not.
a little of that. I've played a little of it. I started it. it's the one about the diabolical box. I played a little of that one. A lot different type of game.
Oh, for sure. It sort of had a similar feel for me, though, just in the sense of constantly solving puzzles to get to the next part of the game.
Sure. A little more constrained, I would say, than 999.
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot less freedom and more. 999 doesn't have as many logic type puzzles as Professor Layton games do.
Oh no, the Layton are very heavy on the logic puzzles, so yeah, it's different than 999 that way.
Yeah, are they? Because I mean, I've never played any of the Layton games. Are they more like word puzzles or math number puzzles?
It's all across the board.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's fun. It's just it's not like 999's like find this item and use this item with this other item kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Those type of scenarios, sort of room puzzle things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas Professor Layton is just like, here's this puzzle, solve it, like move these things around, or you get these sort of clues like, okay, where is this person's window in this building, and you'll get like certain clues to help you figure out and deduct where that might be. So there's not as much. There's a little bit of searching for items and things like that, but there's nothing to this extent. So it's a lot different.
What you're saying is Professor Layton is just like Lumosity. Is that a fair comparison?
I haven't played that either. You
don't see those Lumosity commercials? You know,
I don't have
it
cable.
Feels like games, but I'm training my brain.
Yeah, it's sort of like I think you're kind of hitting on that. Like, the DS is really popular for all these kind of brain puzzles and things like that. More adult type games, and I think Layton's more in that sense, but it has a really good story behind it. But you have to finish these puzzles to sort of progress throughout the game and to move on to the next part, as Mike was talking about, if that makes sense.
And that's where the similarity ends between the two games, really.
Right.
So that is probably a very fair comparison. Anyway, I really like those. Well, I'm not going to say I really like those because those games frustrate me. But the Flash games that are just like escape the room, have you played those before?
I haven't. No.
Those are really obtuse. I mean, like, 999 makes sense in some way. Like you can kind of figure out, like, oh yeah, this kind of works. I have to use this item with that item. But I mean, like, these Flash games don't make any sense. Anyway, we're probably making Bill very proud by going on a tangent within the first 10 minutes.
Well, let me say this and just add this to it. This is a this sort of I saw a special on this one time, and I don't know if it was 60 minutes or something like that. And this was recently, within the year. There are actually these places in Japan that you can go to, and you go with a group of people, and they lock you in these rooms, and they have these sort of puzzles and things that you have to figure out before you can go to the next room. And you try to escape. It's sort of like a maze. So they actually do real-life puzzles like this. How cool would that be?
Is cool.
Yeah. I love what the Japanese come up with.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll have to find that video so we can post that. But but there are these like room escape things, and it's all timed, and that's what 999 really reminded me of. I wonder if one was a spinoff of the other, possibly.
Probably.
Yeah, very likely.
Anyway, we've let's try to get back on course. Let's right. So 999 incorporates that escape the room puzzle with visual novel like storytelling style, and I've never played a visual novel before. This was my first time doing anything like that. What about you guys?
I'd probably say yeah. I mean I think so. I think this is probably my first time playing a very heavily narrative game. I mean, a lot of RPGs are heavily focused on narrative, but there's a lot of free space to roam, or world lands that you can kind of traverse and go across to get a part of the story. This was a more confined narrative where you just keep moving forward and forward. You do get to choose your path, but it's a very confined path, if you will.
Yeah, but it's like you said, it's a video game version of those, choose your own adventure books, right?
Absolutely.
Do you go through door number 1 or door number 2 and, flip to whatever page corresponds to your choice?
Right.
As the other games mentioned, Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, those are probably the closest that I've played. But yeah, this is the first visual novel by definition that I've ever played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Wolf and Walking Dead have a very they have a combat element to them.
Yeah.
A little button pushing element to them, makes them separates them from that. I mentioned we were talking a little prior to the call. Since 999, I've played Hotel Dusk. Room 215, and I've also started playing Trace Memory, which are very similar games in this regard. I have 999 to thank for that. It's really pushed me in that direction of, seeking out those types of games.
Oh, I'm definitely open to more in the future myself.
Yeah, and I guess 999 is a good introductory game into this genre because it's really straightforward. I mean, the plot is, even though it's convoluted, you can still follow it. Because, you have to play the game at least 5 or so times to really experience it, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's the only way to understand the entire game. I think you have to play through every portion of it to really fully grasp what's going on. I think, you're getting bits and pieces everywhere, right?
Right. Well, we're throwing a lot of information out there, and I don't think anybody's really understanding what we're talking about right now. So, to get everybody, if not on the same page, just can get them in on the ground floor, 999, or 9 persons, 9 hours, 9 doors, something to that effect, was released in 2009 for the Nintendo DS, developed by Chunsoft. It was published in North America by Axis Games. They're the same guys who brought us Blaze Blue and Death Smiles. And it is that mixture of visual novel and escape the room puzzles where you have to find clues and items that will ultimately lead to your escape. And it does this very uniquely because it is on the DS, and you have to use your stylus, and your upper screen is basically a layout of the room, and your bottom screen is everything that you can interact with. So it's not so much like pixel hunting. So I guess that's a positive step. A lot of old, point and click adventure games just had a lot of pixel hunting, and this doesn't really do that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is I think the DS is a perfect platform for a game like this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it works well. I think with the DS and with the stylus, being someone who's new to the DS, I just picked my first DS up. I believe it was last year. Shawn had actually sold me one, and you see people playing these, and you see the little stylus, and you're like, how can that be any fun? Playing a game with a little pen, and but in all actuality, the DS has some fantastic games that use the stylus and really implement that device well, and it's what makes the DS so special. I think, in my opinion, and I think that using the stylus in this game, especially with 999, it's done very well. The way both are integrated with each other. So.
I liked using the stylus to interact with the objects on the lower screen. I thought it also worked really well with this game. And like you said, the hardware, luckily with the DS, is good enough for them to be able to pull off this kind of a game. Earlier probably would have been tougher on maybe the Game Boy Advance or something like that, but on the DS, the whole idea works really well. So it's I had a good time with it. It was fun.
Yeah. It's a perfect technological design for something like this, because your upper screen is basically the setting and the action that's taking place, and your lower screen, when you're not like interacting with stuff, it's like your inventory, or like if you need to pull up the help menu, you have that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really cool how if people were talking to you, they showed up on the upper screen, and anytime you had the narrator coming in and whenever you had Junpei's thoughts, or anytime that you had to make a decision as to where to direct the plot, that came up on the bottom screen. So it kind of, it helps you get into Junpei's head because you're not in the action. Even though you're directly involved in what's happening, you are still like a step away from everybody and everything that's going on.
Yeah. The narrative's separated from the action, basically.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. What about the puzzles? I mean, like, that's the biggest part of this game. What, do you have any difficulties with these puzzles?
I think there were some that I had a little bit of difficulty with. I think for the most part, and the way the game's laid out, I think you're able to interact with certain things, and most rooms have a limited space. And I think that it's the right amount of not too small of a space, not too big of a space to explore, to enable you to kind of figure out what you need to use, if that makes sense. And so I didn't have an extraordinarily hard time with puzzles as far as the interactive pieces of the puzzles. I did notice sometimes that I did have a little bit of difficulty with some of the the number sequences and things of that nature. And some of the combination locks and things like that, until it finally dawned on me what I was doing, and the light bulb went off, and I figured it out.
Well, that's probably something we should have brought up earlier, is because everything in this game is based off the number 9 and a little concept that was invented for the purpose of this game called the digital root. And Mike, why don't you run the listeners through what a digital root is?
Pick on the new guy.
The digital root being, are we going to get right into the story, the guts of the game?
You go as deep as you want.
Each character wearing a device that has a number, and each device adding up. But the total of the numbers, those numbers add together, giving you the digital root, if that makes any sense.
Right. It's like a 1-digit number that's what that digital root will be. But if you have anything essentially greater than 10, you realize like a 2-digit number is comprised of 2 digits. So you add those 2 together. And let's say it's 23. So you add 2 and 3, and that gives you 5. And then you can go through door 5.
Right. So maybe we should give a little bit of background about sort of what the game's about, like how it kind of starts out, and kind of, I guess, give people. I'm assuming most people have played this game.
Well, they would have to, or else none of this would make sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So sort of the background is you wake up on this. You kind of figure out quickly that you woken up on sort of this large vessel, like boat. You just kind of wake up on I guess in a bunk, right? A bunk bed room, and
a locked room.
Yeah.
And you notice you've got a watch on your hand. You play as your character's Junpei. That's who you play as, and you've got a watch, a digital watch on your hand that's got the number 5 on it, and so that's your number that's assigned to you. And you get out of that first room, you meet a group of other people that also have digital watches, but everyone has a different number, and
all sequenced 1 through 9.
Right, 1 through 9, and you find these numbered doors, and the only way to get through those doors is to, as we were discussing, is to use the digital root formula. So, what are the rules again? Is it no more than 5 people can go through a door at one time? Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. More than 5, no less than 2.
No fewer than 3. I think
no fewer than 3. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, so let's say, there's a door that has, well, I don't know, a 5 on it. You have to have at least 3 people with a digital root of 5. So you could have, I don't know, let's see. Let's see what, like 7, 6, and 1. 7, 6, and 1 equals 14. And then the 1 and the 4, you add those together of the 14, and that gives you a 5. So that's your digital root, right?
Yep.
That is right.
Okay. So maybe that's a pretty good way to explain. I know those of you who are listening who've never played the game before, it's sort of odd. There's quite a bit of thinking in this game, but the game does most of the math for you. So sorry about that. Sorry about the tangent, guys, but I thought it might be a little helpful to give people a little bit of a basis of the game.
Yeah.
That
wasn't...
Sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say the digital root, it at first it confused the heck out of me, but after playing through 5 or 6 times, you kind of get it figured out pretty good by the end.
Yeah, oh yeah. You stop thinking of numbers as like the full number that they are. You stop thinking of like 14 as 14. You start thinking of it as 1 and 4.
Yeah.
So, and then they also there's so much stuff going on in this game. I mean, they incorporate like conspiracy theories and a lot of pseudoscience and like the hexadecimal system, which counts in base 16. We count in base 10, and binary. Anyone who's done anything with computers or electricity essentially works in base 2. Like you basically have 1, 0 on and off, but base 16 is just a headache until you can finally understand it, and that is the most difficult part of the game, just understanding the rules of how you're supposed to incorporate the numbers.
Yeah.
The actual puzzles themselves of escaping the rooms and finding the items are really straightforward. There's none of this anything that is not relevant, you simply can't click on it, right? It's not like those old games where you click on a coffee cup and the guy says, I could really go for a cup of Joe right now. There's nothing like superfluous. I mean, if everything that is crucial to your escape is something that you can interact with, so that takes out all the.
You don't just add random items to the inventory. Everything has a use.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is not King's Quest.
Exactly.
and the other good thing is everything that you pick up or are able to pick up in that room is used in that room. Mm-hmm. You're not using it later.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not like Resident Evil where you're carrying this key to a room across the mansion in the basement to open a door. It's you're solving within that room with the items you've got there.
And that probably segues nicely into my favorite aspect of this game, is that you could save anywhere.
Right.
That was very helpful, especially in something that is really long and that you're going to have to put the game down to think about a lot. Just the fact that you could pause the game and save, and just if you're getting frustrated, just turn it off and come back to it later was super, super helpful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, with any of these puzzle games, sometimes you need a break and come back with a fresh mind.
I thought that was awesome, the saves and everything, and just being able to, like you said, to save where you want, and if you got a little stuck, you can just kind of, like you said, just kind of come back to it with a fresh head. And something else I really liked about the game, not only just picking up and using items like we were talking about, but there was a feature in this game called Combine, which which I thought was really, really cool. Let's say I remember there's one part where you have to use a knife to
same thing
cut a
I was
piece
thinking.
of meat.
Yeah.
you use a knife to cut a piece of meat, and so if you hit the knife and the piece of meat, you click on the knife, you hit Combine, and then you hit the piece of meat, and then you hit Combine. Then you're going to use that knife to slice that, and I thought that was just a really, really cool feature You don't just kind of interact with the screen, but you can like use items on top of each other, and that was a really cool feature of the game, I thought, and especially with the puzzle solving, added a lot to it.
They utilize that combined feature quite often.
That's
Sure
right.
do.
Yeah.
And it's funny you should mention the combining the knife and the meat, because the kitchen was one of my favorite rooms.
Was it really?
I don't know why, but I really like that room.
I think you get a lot of the story in that room. You know, with the
Yes.
Ice 9, that's where you first get that. There's this really bizarre thing where you get locked in the freezer, and Lotus is just sitting outside not helping you, which is bizarre.
That was kind of strange.
We'll touch on that in just a moment.
My favorite room, I think, was probably the operating room. I really like that creepy puzzle with the body parts.
Yeah.
I like that too. And then with the doors, the red, the blue, and the purple door, where you have to mix the chemicals or whatever to.
Yeah.
That
And then it had
was
the sort of library.
I found
too,
that room
portion.
the most challenging, but once I figured it out and I felt really smart, it became one of my favorites too.
Yeah. I had that as one of my favorite rooms. I had two, which was like you said, the operating room, and then I had the casino as another one. I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that was a good
I
room,
really liked
too.
that room.
I wasn't too fond of the casino. Mostly because of that one playing card that's hidden on the mantle, and that that card is very easy to miss.
Yeah.
It just took me a long time to figure out that you had to turn the lights on for the mantle.
Yeah.
But my least favorite, I think, was probably the cargo room, though. Just the tedious nature of having to move all those boxes around.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
See,
that little
by the
cargo
time
puzzle.
I found that room, I had enough endings, and I kind of had enough of the game itself that I was just using a walkthrough. So
I gotcha. Yeah.
like I can totally agree with you that it's a really tedious room, but I had such like a watered down experience of it.
What, Mike? You like Professor Layton and logic puzzles, and that was your least favorite room?
Imagine that.
That doesn't seem to fit with what you've been saying.
No rhyme or reason.
Yeah, I just like that room too. I think my least favorite room there was the captain's quarters. I think that was the worst room for me. That's where you find the guy with the zero watch, and it took me forever to figure out the code to that door.
Well, you see, because then we use the hexadecimal system again.
Yeah.
Right? And that is just such a wacky number system where you go from, is it 1 to 10,
Right.
and then 11.
And it starts at A.
Then it starts at A, but A is 11, B is 12. But in the captain's quarters, they take that hexadecimal system all the way up to Z. So
Yeah.
36.
Yeah. Oh.
So there's actually 36 numbers, which is 36 is the first. And if you've played the game, which we assume you have, and playing this, it says 0 on the TVs.
Right.
It's got the name 0 on the TVs, and that's what you have to logically put together. And I could not put that together that's what I was supposed to, be spelling out. And it took me a while.
I didn't figure that one out myself at first. And, I mean, it's not obvious, actually. I mean, you just see Z-E-R-O. So you're thinking like, okay, maybe 0 was here, maybe 0 is taunting me. You don't think to use that hex number system with the letters of the alphabet.
No.
Right.
That was a pen and paper moment, that one.
Yeah, oh man, this game breaks the fourth wall so hard.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But anyway, you need to know that botched up hexadecimal system for a very endgame puzzle. But anyway, I think before we start getting into the endings, you're on this ship with 8 other characters. 8 people who, at least during my playthroughs, I thought were going to betray me like every step of the turn. Except for June. I thought because Junpei and June have a little bit of history, I thought like they'd be solid together. Like they would stay by each other's side. But everyone else, Ace, Snake, Santa, Clover, Seven, Lotus, I thought these guys are, got to watch my back.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of the beauty of this game. With a lot of games, you'll start out with the beginning, and you'll just kind of get eased into a game. With this one, you sort of just get thrown into the middle of something that's already occurred. So you're in the middle of the story, and then you run into all of these people, and it seems that everyone sort of makes the decision, we're not going to tell... One of us could be the person who captured us, this Zero character. So we're not going to give a lot of information out about ourselves. So there are a lot of hidden things, and that's I guess that's what makes this game so special and makes this game interesting. There are these things that you don't know about people, and as you play through the game multiple times, you start learning things about these people, and you're piecing together a full narrative out of all these stories.
I think it's kind of set up for like your first time with this game. You're just going to distrust everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first initial playthrough with this game, you start this game off, you have no idea who any of the other people are on the ship with you, but you know that there's traps that you have to get through, otherwise you're going to die. It really felt to me a lot like the beginning of the movie Cube that way.
Oh yeah.
Where you're all trapped with a bunch of strangers and you have to escape, and you don't know why you're there, but you have to escape. But each room, if you don't get through it properly, you could end up dying that way. So,
and that's a really good comparison. I mean, like, if somebody had just come up to me and said, like, "Hey, I've got this game called 999. I'm thinking of playing it. What's it like?" I would say, take the dark and suspenseful vibe of something like Saw.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And subtract the gore. I mean, this game has a little bit of gore, but not to the levels of Saw.
Right.
And then add the sort of puzzle aspect, numerology aspect of Cube, and you get 999.
And maybe throw in... What this game made me think of was the show Lost.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Actually,
yeah.
Lots of people getting thrown together quickly. Which is how Lost starts out, right? With the plane crash, no one knows each other, and then you start figuring things out. Someone was in handcuffs on the plane, all of these like little things, and with these little flashbacks, and you're gathering little by little information, as the episodes go on, which is that's sort of how I viewed this game, because I've never seen Cube, so my association with this game was definitely Lost.
That I like that comparison. I think that's really good. Because just like in Lost, everyone is selected to participate for a specific reason.
Yeah. They're all there for a reason.
I don't think we can really continue without explaining what that reason is. Because the nonary game, was set up by this corporation called Cradle Pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Yeah.
And they were essentially researching like ESP. Basically, they'd have senders and receivers. And they discovered that to promote that sending ability, somebody had to have a sense of danger and a sense of urgency. So they came up with these puzzle rooms and basically threatened people that if you don't get out, you will die. I mean, it's probably a really bad way to conduct a scientific study.
Yeah.
Well, they apparently did start with rats and electrifying the exits. But then moved on to human trials.
Yeah, I don't think this was FDA approved.
No,
definitely not.
But yeah,
creepy Japanese scientist approved.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But basically, everyone who's participating in the non-R game of 999 has some sort of connection to the... I don't even think it has a name, but like the first non-R game, which takes place 9 years before 999.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone but you, actually.
That's right, everyone but you. But anyway, I think, these people they don't know they're connected to each other by some relationship, whether it's they were involved in the original non-R game or their children were involved. Was it Snake and Clover, number 2 and number 4 respectively, were part of the original non-R game? Is that
There were actually 4 participants.
Oh, that
from the
you're
original
right.
non-R game.
That were in the second one?
Yes, and I have it broken. I actually have it broken down, the numbers. I thought it was quite neat. There actually 7 of the actual 9 people were a part of the first non-R game. You've got the 4 participants. You've got Snake. You've got Santa. You've got Clover and June. Were all part of the original non-R game as participants as kids, 9-year-olds.
Yep.
And then you have your 2 designers, which were Ace and the 9th Man. Were both designers of the game, so that's 6. And then you've got 7, who was the actual cop, who was trying to bust Cradle Pharmaceutical for what they were doing, and was an investigator, and almost busted them, and was captured during the first non-R game and imprisoned and escaped. So the only 2 that you don't have, you've got June. She was not in the original non-R game, but her 2 children were. Her two daughters, from what I remember correctly.
Lotus.
You mean Lotus.
Lotus.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not June. Lotus. Yes.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah. Her children were involved with the original game.
Right. And then there's you, who
Junpei.
have no real correlation, except that June, who's the girl.
Yes.
And you have some childhood connection with her.
Right.
So.
Since we understand why essentially everybody but Junpei was involved in the non-R game as we played it, I have a little bit of a theory as to why he was selected. And I think this sort of brings in, and this correlates to the game really well because it deals in a lot of this pseudoscience. And it's almost like, and they talked about this too in the ending, I believe, is that time branches off at very certain points. And Junpei in the non-R game is almost playing in a parallel timeline as younger June is. And so he has to solve a puzzle so that the June, 9 years in the past, can get the solution to the puzzle and solve it in her timeline.
Yeah.
That's how it turned out.
Yeah.
This it's for me this was just it's some reverse Back to the Future Doc Brown stuff.
Yeah.
Like in the movie Back to the Future, you go back in time to change the future. With 999, you're in the future making choices to change the past, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, it's weird because you're making choices to change the
Right.
past, which will change your future.
Right.
So, I mean, it's a super, mind-boggling paradox. I mean, you think of, time paradoxes, and, you think of stuff like Back to the Future, you think, the grandfather paradox. I think there's one in Ocarina of Time, too, about teaching the guy in the windmill the song. No? No one remembers?
I haven't played Ocarina. I
Yeah.
haven't played that, so.
You did play the
there's
Song
there's
of
certainly
Time.
things. Yeah, there's certainly things in Link to the Past, which we're playing right now, where you will go, from one world to the next, and things will change between worlds. If you interact at one point, things will change, between the dark world and the light world. So, something similar to that. I mean, not specific, to time travel, but not specifically past and future.
See,
but,
and you thought these games weren't connected. 999, A Link to the Past, same thing.
This was a little bit strange how they use telekinesis and time travel and sort of combine the two, communicate telepathically back through time.
Yeah,
right.
I think if you played 999 and you didn't get a headache, you did something wrong. Your brain should be hurting from this thing.
Right. So I guess we should maybe point out too, and something we didn't mention before was that there in the original experiment there were actually 18 kids.
Yeah.
And what was happening, what you find out toward the end, is that the group was split. Usually the kids had some sort of relationship. Like most of the time they were siblings, correct?
Right.
And so one sibling would go. There was both places were set up like a sinking ship, but one was out in the middle of the desert. And then one was actually on a ship. So they were split and away from each other, and, they had to use, there was this experiment to sort of increase danger to see if they could help each other out with the puzzles, because their setting was identical in both places.
Right.
But they had to try to correspond, send and receive. One group was, as Floyd mentioned, to the senders, and the other group was the receivers. So, when you sort of find that out, that there were two places, that kind of lends a little bit better to make a little more sense as far as what's going on, with the story, I think.
And they only alluded to that with the best ending, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep,
I think
you're
so.
right.
Yeah.
Because how did it work? Right. Each group were made to believe that they were actually on a sinking ship. And that fact alone, I think, yes, it did increase that element of fear, but it also made people turn against each other, which was an unexpected side effect of the nonary game.
Yeah. In which, it brings in, I'm sure most of us have taken a philosophy class at some point, and there's always, isn't there that, I can't remember what the situation was, something like the baby in the room or whatever. If you open the door, something happens. Do you open the door? There's this whole question of ethics that's involved, with the nonary game. These people like Ace and the Ninth Man on the surface seem very evil, and I think with some of the endings you get, they ultimately are evil.
Right.
But and what they're doing is not ethical, kidnapping kids and into this game. But if you sort of think about it in the theory that they're trying to test, the only way to really put these people in this situation of danger and to be able to communicate with each other is to go about this experiment by that process. I mean, they couldn't say, hey, we're going to try this, we're going to try this game out, kids. We're going to put some of you here, let's get your parents' permission. And, we're going to see if this works, because that wouldn't create a stressful enough situation to test that, because they would say, well, this is just a game. If we don't win, we don't win, right? Because they're kids. But if there's a life-threatening situation, if they've been kidnapped, they're scared, then that's
they had to be deceived.
Right. There's no other way to, test this, scientific theory than to do what these people did. So, I do see these people as bad as far as what they did, ethically, kidnapping and that sort of thing. But at the same time, in the theory of science, there's really no other way to do it, I guess.
Gotta break a few eggs to make an omelet?
Maybe.
I thought it was pretty dark. I mean, taking a whole bunch of kids out of a hospital and then rounding them all up and segregating them into different experiments. I think some people certainly got what was coming to them.
Sure.
Some of them did. I mean,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, well, let's talk about the people who. Let's talk about the people who died.
Depending on which ending?
Over the whole course of the whole thing.
Okay, because there's some people, I guess, that don't die at all.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I mean, like, because I think if you play this game, like, once or twice, you might think, oh, this is like Groundhog Day. I just have to keep doing it until I do it right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not really the case. I mean, that only adds to another layer to this onion that doesn't make sense.
No, yeah, there are very specific things you have to do in order to get the best ending.
Right.
Right. And we should mention that there's 6 endings to this game. There's specifically 6 endings to this game. And like you said, there is one ending that is not called the best ending, but I think most people refer to it as the true ending,
Yeah.
which allows you to get credits and sort of fully flush everything out. But at the same time, I would argue that if you only get the true ending, there's a lot of things you miss.
Right.
There are other things that you miss. So I think you really have to play all 6 endings to really put some sort of kind of put the pieces of this puzzle, if you will, no pun intended, to really understand the game fully.
Right. And that's why I think, I mean, this game was geared towards multiple playthroughs, and it was geared for certain characters to have certain fates. Right?
Yep.
Like, the 9th man who dies pretty much right off the bat.
Mm-hmm. Spoiler
alert. Even though he did have a chance at survival, but Ace deceived him to improve his odds of survival. And that's because the 9th man had the 9th bracelet. And in the context of the nonary game and the magic number 9, whatever...
Basically a skeleton key.
Basically, exactly, yeah. You know, whatever, like, that number 9 bracelet can go anywhere.
Right.
It cancels out any route.
Exactly.
And just enters in 9, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, let's go through the endings in the best way that we can to put it into somewhat of a cohesive story. I mean, so we know that you wake up on a sinking ship, you escape your cabin room, you meet 8 other people in a sort of centralized area.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
The 9th man dies, you branch off, you solve a couple puzzles, and you're reunited again. And this is where some more deception takes place, and this is where people start becoming suspicious of each other, right?
Would this sort of be the hospital room that you're talking about?
This would be the hospital room, yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a big plot point that happens there, and that's they discover that Snake has gone missing, and they find a dead body behind one of the numbered doors.
Mm-hmm.
Clover being Snake's sister gets a little bit distraught about that.
That's
Yeah,
right.
a little bit.
So now you have Clover, who's kind of no longer emotionally stable, and, you know, she becomes a bit of a wild card.
Right.
Yeah.
And depending on your choices of action and things that you do, and doors that you pick and things that she sees, it sort of depends on what kind of ending you're going to get. You know,
That is right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then there's the fact that Ace, who is the number 1 guy, was one of the original designers of the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we should say that you're all thrown together by this character named Zero. There's this character, we hadn't really touched on that. There's this character called Zero, this guy in this creepy gas mask with, you know, red eyes, that has gassed you and that you have a faint memory of. And that's the reason that you're on the ship, and that's the reason all of you are on the ship. You've all been kidnapped, and there's this whole idea: is Zero watching us play this game, or is Zero one of us? And that's what you're trying to figure out the entire time.
That being the difference between the 9 years prior and the modern, the game being that it was the Cradle Pharmaceuticals that rounded up kids. But 9 years later, you have this mystery character, Zero, I assume, gassing all of the characters and capturing them and then putting them on different rooms on this ship where they all have to escape from and reunite.
There's no... I don't think it's... it wasn't ever revealed who Zero was.
No.
Yeah.
Well, kind
Really?
of.
Really? You don't think so?
Well, I'm trying to think, okay, if the ninth man, or Kubota, he was one of the founding four guys of the original Nonary game. Ace was the CEO of Cradle Pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
The captain of the ship, I think, was like the financier or something like that.
Yes.
Yes, something of that nature.
And then...
part of the group.
Yep. And then I can't remember his name, but he's the dead guy behind door number 3.
Right, the one who's dressed as Snake.
Right.
Yeah.
Mistaken for Snake and killed by Ace.
Yes.
Right. Because Ace apparently has some vision issue where he can't distinguish faces.
Well, that is actually a real medical condition.
Sure.
One of the few real ones in the game.
Yeah. Of like, there's so much stuff thrown at you in this game. And the one real thing you'd think like, oh, they made this up. But there is actually a thing called face blindness.
Right.
And it is basically the inability to distinguish facial features and distinguish who's who just by their facial structure. So somebody with face blindness will remember that, my Uncle Bob is the guy with crazy hair. Or, today my sister is wearing a pink shirt, so that's how I know she's my sister, or something like that. They don't remember people by their faces. They have to come up with different visual cues.
Sure.
So Ace recognizes Snake's clothing from having seen him right at the beginning when they all get introduced.
That's right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, this game has so many mysteries. It's like, who kidnapped Snake, right? Who took his clothes and gave him that weird, occult robe.
Yeah.
And why was he stuffed inside a coffin?
Right.
I mean, that's why I think if you think of all these endings as a little bit of a piece of the puzzle, it kind of helps make sense.
Right. Well, doesn't Santa admit to being Zero at some point in the game at the end?
I don't remember, but Santa was one of the original Nonary game participants.
Well, and that's what I thought, was that
And
the whole purpose of this game and setting up this game was to bring his sister back to life.
Yeah.
And so my understanding was, if that was the case, if he's the one that set up this game, then
well, I thought it wasn't to bring his sister back to life. I thought it was
he was
vengeance.
Zero or part of that.
I thought his whole MO was to get revenge against Cradle Pharmaceutical.
Right.
I literally beat this game 4 hours ago and I'm still confused.
And I think that's the point of it. I think it's one of those, it's like going to see some bizarre independent film where it just sort of ends in sort of an odd way, and you're like, gosh, is this movie good or is this movie bad? And then you walk away from it and you're kind of like, these things are running through your head and you're trying to piece everything together and, trying to make some final determination, and possibly it's something you think about for weeks,
Well, isn't that a sign of a good story or movie or game or whatever? Like the ending sticks with you?
Yeah.
It can be, and it can be that it ends up being it never makes sense, and you're never able to piece it together, and you just spend your time frustrated in trying to put it together. If that makes sense as well.
No, that
right?
makes sense, because I mean, I'm thinking that like
it can definitely be a good thing, and I know what you're talking about because I've seen tons of movies that end that way. I love movies that don't end, with the pretty pink bow wrapped up,
Yeah, because I mean, like
concrete ending.
A story
It's like The Road.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah, I hated that ending. I thought that
I didn't
was.
mind.
I really didn't like that ending, but I thought it was appropriate for the story.
Yeah.
I mean, it was. How else could the road end?
Yeah. Now, when you guys played this game, did you guys get 2 bad endings basically right off the bat?
sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's what I got, and I think that's kind of standard for this game.
I think. Well, yeah. When I came to Rich and I said, why don't we play 999 this month? And he was. You didn't outright
played it. Yeah.
You didn't outright say no. I mean, I came to you because I knew you had played it, so I wanted your feedback on this as a suggestion, and
Right.
you didn't say no, but you gave me a big word of warning.
We went back and forth with this for quite a while.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I think because, like we said at the beginning of this recording, is that 999 is not like your typical choose your adventure game.
Right.
No.
This, like, you can reach an ending that's just like you died, the end.
Right.
Thanks for playing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that's where Floyd and I we sort of had an impasse, and I was trying to express my thoughts to Floyd. I was like, Floyd, you can't tell people. Floyd's like, well, let's let everybody play this game, and then they'll get an ending, and then we'll just all talk about what ending we got. I'm like, no, you can't do that. That's impossible for this game.
Exactly.
Yeah, you have to play all of the endings.
Right. And he's like, well, I've played Heavy Rain. I've played these other games. I got an ending, and I was okay. I was satisfied with that ending. I said, but no, you can't do that, because if you only play one ending, you're going to be angry, and you're not going to...
Oh, exactly.
You're not going to be able to piece the entire story together. So we had to figure out a way to do this, and that's one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about was, Floyd and I setting this up, and we saw from the onset this was going to present challenges as a playthrough game, and it sounds bizarre when you say, okay, week 1, beat the game.
Week 2, beat the game.
Yeah, and but that's how we had to present it. We're like, okay, each week you play the game to completion, which is roughly 5 to 7 hours a week. I think is kind of standard fare for a playthrough. It gets a little shorter because you're able to do some shortcutting with the dialogue, because the dialogue allows you to skip that if you've gone through a certain room or you've already heard the dialogue before. Right?
I found that each playthrough was like at least 4 to 5 hours, even if I was skipping text.
Sure.
Because
it's a very talky game.
It's very talky, right? But
yeah.
I found the 3rd and 4th playthroughs to be fairly quick myself, with the just pushing right on the D-pad all the time. Begin with memories, as it was called.
Yeah, I mean that's what you have to do, right?
Yeah.
But like each ending, and with the closer you get to the true ending, those endings get longer too.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not like if you beat this game once and it took 7 hours, if you play it again, it's going to take 6 hours because you can skip all that text. Right. It might take 7 hours, it might take 8 hours because you have to
read new parts.
Read new parts, exactly.
Yeah.
Or you then there's additional rooms.
And there's additional rooms, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there are some paths where you can just go through 2 doors. I think that's... I have it written down here somewhere.
The knife ending? It's pretty cool.
I think so. I know that if you go through door 3 in any ending, the game kind of takes over and just takes you to a bad ending. Because you do something weird that essentially forces the group to split up in a way that it can't reunite, or like their digital roots get all wacky or something.
You didn't get to assure a character, and she just kept on being crazy and murders you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be the axe ending.
That was the axe
Yeah.
ending
that
which
we're talking about.
I thought
Yeah.
that was a really cool one.
That was the first ending I got, and I was just like, "What? That's how this all goes down? I get chopped out of the blue by this crazy girl with pink hair."
Yeah, that's
And she didn't really seem to be gearing up to be, murdering me. She seemed a little off, but chopping me in the back with an axe off, I didn't see that coming. So.
no. I mean, you won't see any of the bad endings coming because they either are like you get literally backstabbed in all the bad endings.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which there's only 3 though, right? That result in your untimely demise.
That's right. That's the knife ending, the axe ending, and the submarine ending.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
The knife.
In the axe ending, it's it's Clover that kills everyone
Yep.
basically. It's on a murder spree.
Yeah.
And in the knife and the submarine ending, I wasn't able to deduce who it was at
Neither
first.
was I.
But
Nor was
after going back and thinking about the events that happened after I got the true ending, I was able to figure out who it was that murders you in both of those, and it's Ace, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
That would
see
be
that.
Who would do it?
But I mean, of the bad endings, I think the submarine is the only one that gives you like a sense of, yes, I'm gonna get out of here. They're like, there's a sub.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even though you find everybody dead, but you find a submarine, so you're like, well, everybody's dead, but I can escape. I can't drive a submarine, but it's a video game, so let's just forget that.
And that sub's gonna go out through the middle of the desert and sand. What?
Well, we don't
right.
know that yet, do we?
Right.
So you getting murdered was just that solved plot holes.
Well, yeah, I guess they're just unexplained plot holes, right?
Yeah.
But
Lots.
working towards that true ending, you get the safe ending, which is kind of long and it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, but the safe, actually opening the safe, is what reveals to you who the people are on the boat that are in the pharmaceutical company.
That's right.
That's where you find that out. That information's inside that safe.
Yeah.
There is also the coffin ending, which I think, you'll get the coffin ending if you do everything right, but you haven't received the safe ending yet.
Yeah. That was just bizarre to me. It's like that ending was like, okay, you get the coffin ending, and then it will say to be continued, and then you have to go back and do everything exactly as you just did it to get the true ending.
Right.
Which to me is just bizarre, but it's basically the designer saying, no, you got to play this game more than one time. It's the force. They're forcing you to play it more than one time.
Yeah.
So, and as I think I mentioned before the call, I was able to skip the coffin ending because I'd already completed the game once. If you've already completed the game and got a bad ending or the safe ending before, you can skip the coffin ending by just going straight for the true ending.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right.
Yeah,
I had the
bizarre.
4 endings done, and then on my 5th playthrough, upon beating it, I unlocked the last 2 endings automatically. It did both of them.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly right.
Because in the true ending, which is basically the latter half of the coffin ending, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
You find out that it is, in fact, Snake who's in the coffin.
Right.
Then you proceed to find June, who is held at gunpoint by Santa. Is that right? Somebody's held ransom towards the end. Or is it Lotus?
Ace has the revolver and is holding Lotus.
That's right, yeah.
Ransom at the end, inside the incinerator.
And yes, that's basically you go into the incinerator where the true, real final puzzle happens. And everything has been so, like, logical up to this point, where it's just, combining items, using certain items on certain aspects of the room, and then they throw a Sudoku puzzle at you. Why?
I've always sucked at those things. I know.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no.
Never been a big fan of Sudoku.
No. No.
You mean
Like,
Mahjong or something, but not that.
Yeah.
But this is sort of where it comes all together. And you mentioned Snake being inside the coffin. And, of course, the coffin has a digipad on it that, you have to open up. And out of the blue, you just know what numbers to punch in, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just like, oh, I know what numbers to punch in. You're like, well, that's weird. How did that happen? And then as you're going to the incinerator, you start piecing it together is that June is contacting you from the distant past and giving you that information.
Right.
That's how it's popping in your head. That's the ESP and the telekinesis and
the sense
and
of danger, the sense of danger and urgency.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was I didn't see that coming. I thought that was a really good surprise. The fact that what you were doing was essentially saving June 9 years in the past.
Right.
And that goes to where you're talking about the puzzle, the Sudoku puzzle, where you're doing that, but the irony of that is that you're sending information to her, and you have that part of the game. You have to flip the DS upside down, and you're playing on the other half of it and filling in that puzzle, which basically means that you're playing as her.
That's
in
right.
The past.
Yeah.
So that was a neat little twist. And I really like that. I really like how developers use the DS in creative ways to do that. I know there's a few games that I've played where you have to actually close the DS to make things happen, or blow into the microphone hole to make things happen. I think that's a really cool interactive piece, and it kind of harkens back to the days of even the original Famicom, where you'd have to sing into the controller and do things like that. Just bizarre little pieces of technology that have kind of made their way, and that's pretty cool. I really enjoyed that piece of it, and I thought that was really well implemented into the story, if you will.
I liked it in the level they did it. If they would have did it like WarioWare, that kind of thing, then it might have got a little bit too much. But having to tilt your DS and blow into it, and WarioWare is crazy with the gimmicks with the DS that way.
Yeah, but I mean, like, we're in WarioWare, that's like just a gimmick. Yeah. This turning over the DS was like a game mechanic, and it's also like that's another area where the game breaks the fourth wall, right? Yeah,
for sure. It made strong gameplay for the game.
Yeah, oh, definitely. So I'm sure we all used some kind of walkthrough for the Sudoku puzzle at the end, and I'm not going to be ashamed of it.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna own it. I hate those things.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah.
I'm sort of disappointed that it all came down to one of those types of puzzles. I was like, oh, really?
I don't know why I bothered doing it upside down still though.
Did you flip the DS, or did you actually do it upside down?
I did it upside down for whatever reason. I could have easily flipped the DS, but I was like, no, I'm cheating. I'll just do it this way.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yep, it worked. You beat the game.
Yeah. In the nick of time.
Now, see, because I used a walkthrough for the final ending, is that final puzzle timed? Because I read somewhere.
I don't know.
I read somewhere that you have unlimited time to do all the puzzles except the last one, and when you're going for the true ending, you have some. I think you have 2 or 3 more puzzles to do after the church room, right? Like you go to that library, which I know we said there's no pixel hunting, but there's pixel hunting.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, the library and the study were the last two rooms for the good ending.
Yeah, I didn't like those.
Not a big fan. And there was the coffin room. Well, the quote unquote sort of the not really. I guess it's sort of the hideout or the place where the gadgets were done and where the supposed Titanic mummy was.
Oh, right. Was it like
that room as well?
Zero's
workshop, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Or Santa's workshop.
Pun intended.
Clever.
But yeah, I think getting back on track, you solve the incinerator puzzle, you find out that you're doing another one of these weird, hexadecimal number systems, but with the whole alphabet. And the final door has what looks like a 9 on it, but you don't have any possible number combination that adds up to 9 until you realize it's actually a Q.
A lowercase q.
Yeah. Way to troll us.
Yeah.
That was and it was everybody could get through that door, right?
Right.
Yeah. You got me, Cradle Pharmaceuticals. You got me.
Joke's on me.
Yeah.
Egg on my face.
Yeah, and then you find out that it's actually a letter Q door. You go through there. Everybody, meanwhile, thinks that you're crazy because you're just telling everybody to touch the number reader thingy.
Yeah.
And then, much to their surprise, a door opens. You run up a spiral staircase. You escape. And you find yourself in the middle of the desert.
Right. You're on the desert.
Yeah. It turns out that you were on the land-based group.
Uh-huh. Right.
And anyway, I think it gets a little bit of a Hollywood ending where you stuff Ace into the back of the van and tie him up and drive away. And there's a little weird...
To be delivered... Sorry, to be delivered to the authorities.
Right. There's that, yeah. But then there's a weird little, almost like cameo appearance of somebody just at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who...
Alice,
yeah.
Oh, spoilers.
Alice, all ice. This person who was supposedly... This Egyptian mummy who was supposedly frozen, but doesn't thaw out until like 96 degrees or something.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say right here, if you haven't played the game and you're listening to this, you're probably like, what in the world are they talking about? And this game is so fragmented and convoluted, the story, and much like our conversation is right now. I mean, we have to go all over the place. There's no way to kind of discuss this story in a linear fashion, right? And so that's
not really.
It's not linear. I mean, it does go from beginning to end in a linear fashion.
Sure.
But there's a lot of gaps.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on. It's like, oh, well, I explained this, but I forgot to say something about this, which is important to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that in this game. And the only true way to experience this game is to play it. I mean, it's a narrative, but gosh, I don't know if it would work well as a narrative as far as, being a movie or a film or something like that. I think this is, it has very, cinematic aspects to it, but at the same time, I couldn't imagine watching a film like this and it being cohesive at all, but playing it as a game and taking pieces, small bits from it.
I think, it can only...
It's the perfect format. Right?
It can only work as a game. Because I was...
It would...
Yeah, go ahead.
So it would be really strange for this to be set up as a film. Like, even beginning to try and understand how that would work. Like 20 minutes of the film would be the first part where you get murdered by an axe, and then all of a sudden, the screen goes black, and it's like Groundhog Day, where you just wake up in the room flooding all over again.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's
I suppose it could be done, but it would just be very odd.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It is very odd, to say the least. I think we've discussed all the features of the game, and if anybody can't follow, then I can't apologize, because I mean, just the game is inherently not easy to follow.
Right.
No.
I mean, and it's not one of those things that's like hard to understand because they took a lot of liberties with it. It's hard to understand just because it's weird, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just as a side note, this is probably the most adult DS game I've ever played. Just as far as language and the sort of the allusion to the violence in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, I think it is really dark. Yeah.
But like there was F-bombs in the narrative quite often. I've never seen that in any other Nintendo game that I'm aware of.
Well,
or Nintendo platform, sorry.
Right. I think people wouldn't be using sugar-coated curse words in a scenario like that.
Right.
Probably
it's very
not.
true to form.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
I give them props for that, though, because Nintendo, they've always shied away from that kind of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Always been known as the family system, the family computer, Famicom, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So
the safe console.
Right.
Yeah, if you thought Nintendo was all, Mario and Pikmin and rainbows and sunshines, nope.
Pick this game up, you'll see.
Yeah.
Betrayal, F-bombs.
I didn't really think of that. Yeah, I didn't really put that together, but you're right. I mean, it's entirely, the type of story that you wouldn't see on Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
And for this to only be released on the DS, I mean, that says a lot, about the story and, how it stands as far as them, allowing this to be on their system.
Yeah.
So that's, and there's actually a sequel to this game, correct?
There is.
Really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's available on the 3DS and the PS Vita, and it's called Virtue's Last Reward. Zero Escape, I should say. Virtue's Last Reward.
Why do I have a feeling that Mike will be at Krabby's store tomorrow?
We got that in North America?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Add another one to the list.
I think the only thing we didn't get, and maybe even Japan didn't get this, but there was apparently a third game in development or in some kind of planning stages. Yeah, it's...
I'm intrigued now. I really want to see where they go from this game.
Based on what I know, and I haven't played it, but just like from reading reviews and watching enough stuff on YouTube that I can get a taste of what to expect without spoiling anything for myself. Some characters return.
Mm-hmm. That's my understanding.
And there is a new Nonary game. And in the new Nonary game, they incorporate the prisoner's dilemma. You can rat somebody out, or you can ally with somebody. And if
so they incorporate more of the backstabbing, double crossing that sort of goes on between some characters.
Except in Virtue's Last Reward, I think, if you vote to backstab somebody and the group votes to backstab somebody, you get 2 points. If you vote...
there's a point system.
This has a point system, and I'll get to that in a second. If you vote to ally with somebody and they vote to backstab, you get 1 point. If you vote to ally and the group votes to ally, then you get no points. And the first to 9 points wins. And when one person gets 9 points, they can go through the number 9 door. That is the end.
So from what you just said, you cannot win the game unless you backstab people.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's all that I can say because it's all that I really know. And
No, fair enough.
I mean, I want to know more. I want to play it, but I've got so much on my plate right now. Like, just we're wrapping up Link to the Past too, and we're gonna have to start some big games in the next couple months. But that is, I'll pick it up eventually, and should be good.
Yeah,
and I think. Yeah, we got everything. We got the convoluted story. We got the endings. Any closing thoughts, guys?
Yeah, let's talk about let's talk a little bit about our thoughts on the game. You know, sort of our review, if you will. Like, is this a game that we all liked? You know, is this something that we would, you know, tell other people about and tell them to play?
I definitely liked it, and I mean, if writing about 4 or 5 pages of notes is any indication,
go ahead, Floyd.
It's very unique, and I give it a lot of points for that. It's like Mike said, it's as far as we know, the most adult game on the Nintendo platform. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the most engrossing and captivating things that I've played in a long time, I think. Like, I beat this game in a week. I was getting about an ending a day. And it left me feeling so burnt out at the end. But it was so worth it, too.
I agree with that. There is a feeling of being burnt out with this game. And definitely, you know, playing the same things over and over again gets a little tedious.
Mm-hmm. I mean, even if you
think
can
for me
skip,
it was really, really aggravating to have to look up, like, how to get the true ending, you know? And I was like, I just don't want to keep playing through this game over and over again. You know, I know there's a true ending here. I don't want to keep playing through this game over and over again, getting the same endings.
And,
you know,
and
it's a time sink. That's a huge time sink.
It's a big time sink because, like, 6 endings, even if you, let's say you don't go for the coffin ending explicitly, then there's 5 endings times, let's say, conservatively 5 to 8 hours per game, per storyline, I should say. You know, that's typical, like, JRPG 40-hour minimum.
Yeah.
Without the constricts of a monthly playthrough, I suppose a guy could have been playing it forever. I would imagine it would take that long to get you all the endings, but it definitely time-consuming. And like Floyd, you had a couple endings that you had gotten a couple times.
Mm-hmm. Well, the only reason that I was able to beat this in a week is because I was taking down notes of basically, like, how to optimize a room and which doors did I go through in which order.
Right.
And just to help me make sense of everything that I was witnessing, I sort of jotted down the key points of what everybody was saying and all these revelations that I was getting. Yeah. But that's the thing, you have to have a pen and paper ready with you when you're playing this.
And we should say that the game does a good job of, if you've been to a room, it will kind of darken out and show that you've been to that room before. But sometimes you only have like 2 or 3 choices of rooms, so you have to know where you've been before, so it does help to jot it down, you know, at least in your, you know, subsequent playthroughs, because they'll all be kind of darkened out, right? You know, at some point. So there's that. For me, and, you know, we had talked a bit before about how Mike had just finished the game a few hours ago. Floyd's probably about a week out from finishing, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Maybe a little longer. And I originally picked this game up, I think I picked it up around October of last year, and it was when I picked up, and I remember picking it up, and the guy at the counter I bought it, he's like, oh, this is a really good game. And I picked it up on a whim. I didn't know anything about this game.
Okay.
I read the back, and I'm like, I think I picked it up for under $10.
That's really good.
And I was, and I read the back, and I was like, well, this sounds really interesting. You know, this sounds like something I would really enjoy playing. had sort of a kind of a creepy, mysterious aspect to it, some puzzle solving. I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot, and I ended up playing it in December. So I finished it late December of last year. So sorry I didn't play with you guys during the month, but just being a little more than a month removed, I just didn't want to play it again, and I had already gotten all the endings.
Mm-hmm.
But even now, having this much time away from it, I'm really still on the fence about whether I really like this game or not. I think it's brilliant. I think like that whole idea of using the number 9 and the number system and how they went about the game is completely mind-boggling to me. How they could set this game up.
Mm-hmm.
And all the things they had to take in consideration. Will this work? What are the probabilities? What are the possibilities of this? To me, that's completely fascinating and one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a game.
I think, just like plotting this game out, like doing the storyboards for it, right?
Absolutely.
The fact that they had to map out every route you could possibly take.
Every scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the positive thing for me. That's the positive takeaway. And what I love about this game, I love the puzzles too. The puzzles I thought were really well done. They were a lot of fun. They were very interactive. Great use of the DS, as I mentioned before. But where my take and my negativity toward this game is really the plot holes and the story. A lot of it felt. I guess I compared this game to Lost,
mm-hmm.
and how like Lost is this like over captivating story, and spoiler, the ending of Lost sucks.
I liked it.
Oh yeah,
I thought it was good.
Okay,
it's in the same way you're describing this. The ending of Lost had too many plot holes that left you wanting more. Like,
and I know what you mean, Floyd, and I'm satisfied with the ending of Lost, but I felt like over the creation of Lost, there was so much build-up, and I feel like they never had any idea of where they really wanted to go from the beginning until the end. And I sort of felt that same way about this game. I felt like there were things that were just sort of, the
red
ESP.
herrings, maybe.
Yeah, and the whole ESP. I didn't understand the mummy thing.
Or the Ice 9.
Yeah, it just and then the facial recognition, all these like different little things were kind of thrown in that made the game a little more and more ridiculous, But at the same time, I really enjoyed the game.
I think
there's so much about it I think's brilliant.
If you want to make that comparison to Lost, Lost didn't really bring in anything that didn't need to be there. I think. Neither did 999 to that extent, but they didn't flesh out their sort of pseudoscience stuff that they were talking about. Lost worked on a much more simple premise, was that they needed to crash land on that island, and they needed to integrate with each other so that they could accept their shortcomings and their flaws so that they could...
Mm-hmm. Pass over,
right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
That kind of makes sense.
Right. Right.
999 is just wacky.
I like the game. My first time with a more of an adult sort of puzzle story-driven game. The Layton series doesn't have people exploding when you go into rooms and things like that. Little Luke dropping the F-bomb when you don't do a puzzle right or anything like that. I like this game, and I liked a lot of the pseudoscience. I liked my favorite thing in the whole game for story-wise as part of the plot was where they explain about the Santas. The white and black Santa.
Oh, wow, yeah. Yeah,
that was my favorite thing. I've told people that story after playing the game.
That was actually really cool, and
that's where the red suit came from, the blood.
Yeah, exactly. Originally, there was a white and black Santa. The black Santa was bad and punished the bad children, and the white Santa was good and brought the good children toys. Except he started getting annoyed at the Black Santa because he was always bad, so he decides to murder him, and all the blood turns his white suit red, and that's where the Red Santa came from.
Mm-hmm. But, I mean, that ties in with Santa's character really well, because he's having that sort of ethical crisis, where like, he doesn't know where he lies on the spectrum. Is he good or is he bad?
Yeah. So, I mean, I thought it was a really good story for me. I like my storylines to sometimes be a little bit darker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it hit for sure that way.
Oh, absolutely, for me too.
So, and the gameplay was all puzzle driven. So there was no action sequences like we described with games like Walking Dead, where you have the action sequences as well as puzzles.
Mm-hmm.
But those Walking Dead game and Wolf Among Us, there really is no puzzles in those games, or is there?
No, they're almost like,
it's just all a story. Those games,
yeah, it's all story
built into it. So this is story with puzzles. It's kind of, I enjoyed it though. I thought it was a decent game, and I'm really intrigued now knowing there's a sequel. I want to know where they go with hopefully explaining some of those plot holes in further games.
Sure.
I certainly hope they do.
Yeah, me too.
And again, you know, like I said, I'm just sort of just still on the fence with this game. You know, there's so much I really love about it. But yeah, I just, you know, just so, you know, other things. I really like the ESP aspect of it. You know, that's pseudoscience, I understand, but, you know, a little of that's okay. But I think it, you know, it went a little far. And another kind of question I had, maybe you guys can help me flush this out.
Mm-hmm.
We know that everyone, like, they're separated into two groups. One's on the desert, one's in the desert maze, replica ship, and others are actually on the ship. How is it that we know that, like, all of these characters that are split are siblings, but how is it that our character, Junpei, has some sort of relationship with June that they are able to connect? It just seems strange that he is sort of an other. You know, he's sort of an outsider to this entire process. And how does he get brought into this process? I guess does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh, of course. I mean,
yeah.
Other than Junpei and June being childhood friends,
right?
I mean, you don't know where their childhood begins. Does it begin after the original Nonary game or before?
Right.
But yeah,
I assume their friendship resumed after the original Nonary game. Like, they were friends and she got kidnapped, but it resumed. But that's just reading a whole lot into it that they don't explain any of that.
Yeah. There's a rabbit story about the murdered rabbits.
Yeah.
And the puppy that he defends at the end.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear about that, you know, there's definitely connection between the two, but, you know, there's not a sort of an utero connection, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like,
I think
like the others have.
Maybe it's a little bit like, you know, Doctor Who, and it gets all timey-wimey.
Yeah.
I don't like Doctor Who, but that's the only quote that I know.
Right.
Or maybe if you want to make a comparison to something that we can all sort of relate to, because the Collector Cast did an episode on it. It's almost like BioShock Infinite, where you have multiple timelines going on at the same time.
Blah 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 blah.
I still gotta finish
sorry, I haven't played that
yet.
I haven't played the first one.
Don't worry,
I've only played about 20 minutes into it. So
don't worry, Infinite is just Call of Duty with magic.
And then the other thing that I guess I had to question with the game is June an actual physical presence in this second edition of the Nonary game? I mean, everyone seems to see her. At first I was thinking, like, maybe she's just sort of a ghost that only Junpei can see, and she's sort of looking through his eyes, but she is actually a physical manifestation, and then in the incinerator room, she just disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite get that myself. Like, everybody, like you say, Rich, everybody seemed to acknowledge that she was there.
Right.
But then in that incinerator room, sequence, then
Right.
yeah, like you say, she's gone. So was she really there the whole time, or that part I was confused about.
Right. Then that was me too. I'm like, oh my god, is this the Sixth Sense? You know.
Yeah.
There for a minute, only, Junpei can see her, but then, everyone makes references to their relationship and, so she's definitely a physical presence.
Well, she's definitely there because, that's one thing we didn't touch on yet.
Yet.
June's bracelet is the number 9. It was just put on her upside down.
Right, so she thought it was a 6.
Everyone thought it was a 6.
Yeah.
And which makes the game even more brilliant because you could go back and sort of trace this, with the different decisions that are made, and the numbers still work out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
yeah.
and again, I mean, wow. I mean, the designers of this game are it's brilliant. It's a brilliant game. I think it goes a little too far over the line, but I mean, just the brilliance of the game is just impeccable. I mean, it's so well thought out.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
All right.
So, what do you guys think we wrap that up as best as we could?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's...
I hope so.
I certainly hope so too.
No, I think we touched on the points as best as we could. Other than that, I mean, somebody just simply has to play this game to experience it.
Yeah, you put it the best way. You just have to play this game if you want to really get the experience of it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we did the best that we could to wrap up a very convoluted game, and I appreciate everybody for sticking through this one. I mean, took a bit of a chance on this one, but I think it was totally worth it. So a big thank you to Doug Lee 007, Engineer Mike, thanks for playing, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Rido, we don't know what happened to him. He started, but
the thunder from down
the thunder from down under got I don't know, sank on the ship. And then our very lovable single banana. Thank you.
Oh. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, guys.
It's a couple days after Valentine's Day. We got to share the love.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right on.
So next month we will be playing Batman Arkham Origins on that's available on the PC, Xbox 360, and PS3. And it's essentially a origin story for the whole Arkham franchise. Never played this one before. It's Shawn's recommendation for us. Should be good. Batman's my favorite superhero, so got some.
I'm looking forward to joining.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. Hopefully it's got enough of that Metroidvania that Asylum had. All hail Funya-Rimpa. Bye.
And with that, we draw the show to a close. Thank you for listening, and a very special thank you to everyone who joined the playthroughs and to our special guest, Engineer Mike, for joining the show. Remember to visit rfgeneration.com to participate in our playthroughs, discuss the games, or leave feedback about this podcast. Join us next month in our playthroughs for March 2015, in which Rich will be hosting Medieval for the Sony PlayStation, and I will be hosting Batman Arkham Origins for the PS3 and Xbox 360. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on the RF Generation PlayCast.